Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime Stories from History. Tonight we step into a frontier winter where the sky has vanished, the road has disappeared, and your entire world has narrowed to a small cabin trembling beneath the weight of snow. Outside, the wind presses against the walls like a giant hand. Snow slips through the tiniest cracks. The chimney moans. Somewhere beyond the door, a fence post disappears 1 inch at a time, and the path to the barn is already becoming a memory. This is not the charming holiday kind of snow. This is the kind that buries wood piles, blinds travellers, and quietly suggests that you probably will not survive this unless everyone in the household knows exactly what to do. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell us where in the world you're listening from and what the local time is where you are. Now, dim the lights and imagine the latch dropping into place behind you. You stand inside a frontier home sometime in the 19th century on the northern plains or the Canadian prairie. The family around you has seen bad weather before. They do not panic when the flakes thicken. Panic wastes heat, energy, and useful daylight instead. Everyone moves with the quiet speed of people who understand that a storm is not one problem. It is a chain of problems, and each link is waiting for someone to make a mistake. The first task is to seal the house. You watch a folded rag pushed beneath the door. A child carries scraps of cloth to the windows. The smallest gaps are packed with whatever is available. Perhaps moss, tow, old newspaper, or a strip cut from a garment too worn to save. In summer, a narrow crack is a nuisance. Tonight, it is a tiny machine for removing warmth. The shutters are closed firmly, if there are no shutters. Quilts may be hung across the windows. Daylight becomes a grey blur, and the home feels like a box beneath the snow. Across cold regions, people have long used layered walls, low ceilings, small windows, and shared rooms to conserve heat. On the North American frontier, log cabins became a familiar symbol of settlement, though many families began in rougher shelters, including dugouts and sod houses. The famous cabin was not always the first home, nor was it always the warmest. A sod dwelling, for all its dampness and insects, could hold heat surprisingly well because Earth changes temperature slowly. Sometimes survival looks less like a heroic painting and more like living inside a grassy mound while a beetle falls from the ceiling into your soup. You hear the stove lid lift with a soft iron scrape. Someone adds fuel, but not much. The fire must be fed, not spoiled. A roaring blaze feels comforting, yet it burns through the woodpile with alarming speed. The family is already counting logs. They know how many days the stack might last, and this storm is not behaving ordinarily. Outside, snow gathers against the door. If the drift rises too high, the family may be trapped from the outside in, so before darkness settles, 2 adults tie scarves over their faces, pull on heavy coats, and step out with a shovel. You follow only as far as the threshold. The cold strikes instantly. It is pressure against your skin, a sharpness inside your nose, a sudden tightening in your chest. Snow races sideways instead of falling. The barn, perhaps only 30 paces away, appears and disappears like a ghost. A rope is secured between the house and the outbuilding. People can lose direction within a few yards during a whiteout. You may think you could simply walk toward the barn you visit every day. Then the world turns white. The wind spins you slightly, and familiar ground becomes blank space. The rope gives your hand something honest to believe. Historians still argue whether frontier memoirs sometimes exaggerated the suddenness and scale of certain blizzards, especially when written decades later. Memory enjoys drama. Publishers enjoy it even more. Yet weather records and contemporary reports confirm that major storms isolated communities, killed livestock, blocked rail lines, and confined families for days or longer. The details may grow in the telling, but the danger needs little decoration. Back inside, boots are knocked against the floor, snow falls from coats and melts into dark patches near the stove. Wet clothing is dangerous, so mittens and scarves are spread to dry. Though never too close to the flame, one spark could turn the solution into a larger problem. Now everyone takes stock. Food is counted without ceremony. Flour, cornmeal, beans, dried fruit, salted meat, perhaps potatoes or turnips stored below the floor. Candles are checked. Lamp oil is measured. Matches are guarded from dampness. Water buckets are filled while the well remains usable. Feed for animals is counted separately, because a cow cannot be politely asked to skip supper until Tuesday. Even the youngest children receive tasks. One gathers kindling, another folds blankets. An older child checks the corners for drifting snow. Work keeps fear from spreading. It also reminds each person that survival is shared. No one in the room is merely waiting to be rescued. The family listens as they work. Wind whistles through a crack, groans along the roofline, then drops suddenly into silence. That silence may be worse. You pause, expecting the next gust. And when it arrives, the whole house gives a small wooden shudder, a quirky belief in some rural communities held that objects near a doorway, perhaps a horseshoe or a Bible, might protect a household from storms. The horseshoe did not stop the blizzard, of course, but keeping courage near the door may have mattered in its own way. Humans like to place meaning beside danger. It makes the latch feel stronger. As evening closes in, supper is simple and warm, steam rises from a pot. The room smells of smoke, damp wool, onions, and hot grain. Bowls are held in both hands, partly from hunger and partly because the heat feels precious against the fingers. No one says the storm will end soon. Instead, the family prepares as though it may continue. More cloth is pressed into gaps. The shovel is brought inside so it cannot vanish beneath a drift. A lantern is placed where everyone can find it. Bedding is moved closer together. The fire is adjusted again. Lower now, steady and red. You begin to understand the frontier method. Survival does not arrive as one grand act of courage. It comes as 100 small decisions made before fear becomes urgent. Close the shutter, dry the mitten, count the flour, save the log, tie the rope, keep the children busy, listen to the roof, and as the snow climbs higher against the walls, the cabin settles into its first long night, holding its warmth as carefully as a cupped hand protects a flame. The flame in the stove settles into a steady red glow, and your attention shifts from the weather outside to the structure holding it back. The cabin is no longer merely a home, it is a shell, a shield, and a complicated collection of weak points. You look toward the walls. At first glance, they appear solid. Thick logs rest one above another, darkened by smoke and age. Yet logs are rarely straight, and where one bends away from the next, narrow gaps appear. In summer, those gaps invite insects and dust. In winter, they invite the prairie wind, which enters with the persistence of an unpaid relative who has decided to stay until spring. The spaces between the logs must be filled. This work is called chinking, and frontier families use whatever materials can be gathered and pressed into place. Clay, mud, moss, grass, strips of wood, animal hair, and scraps of cloth may all become part of the wall. A more durable mixture might include lime or sand. But remote households often rely on what lies within walking distance. You run your fingers near one seam and feel a thread of cold air. It's astonishing how much colder a room becomes when the wind finds even a small opening. The family pushes fresh material into the crack, then smooths mud across the surface. The repair is rough, but beauty is not the immediate concern. The wall only needs to persuade the weather to remain outside. Log cabins become one of the most famous images of frontier life. especially in stories about American settlement. The image is partly accurate. Many settlers built with logs where forests provided timber on open grasslands. However, trees might be rare, expensive, or miles away. Families there often turn to earth itself. A dugout may be cut into the side of a hill or bank. Its walls are partly made by the ground, and a roof of poles, brush, and soil covers the space. A sod house is built from blocks of prairie turf, stacked like enormous bricks. The roots woven through each block help hold it together. You might not admire the elegance of a home constructed from chunks of grass, yet sod has one great advantage: it insulates. Earth warms and cools slowly. During a bitter storm, a thick sod wall can protect the room from sudden drops in temperature more effectively than a thin wooden wall. The interior remains chilly, certainly, but it may avoid the sharp swings that make a poorly sealed cabin so difficult to heat. Of course, the sod house brings its own collection of inconveniences. Rain may cause the roof to leak, dirt can fall into food, mice may move into the walls, insects sometimes emerge at inconvenient moments, including during meals, prayers, and visits from people you hoped to impress. One frontier story describes families holding umbrellas indoors during heavy rain because water dripped through the roof. Whether every such story is accurate is difficult to know, but the image survives because it feels entirely possible. The frontier home often requires the occupant to behave as carpenter, plasterer, roofer, pest controller, and mildly disappointed interior decorator. The house is built small for a reason. A large room demands more fuel. A tall ceiling allows warm air to rise above everyone, where it contributes very little to human comfort. So ceilings are often low, and sleeping lofts may catch the warmer air collecting near the roof. Doors are narrow, windows are few. Each opening offers light and ventilation, but also allows heat to escape. Glass is expensive in many remote regions. Some early homes use greased paper, cloth, or thin animal membrane to cover a window opening. These materials admit a weak glow while blocking some wind. You cannot see much through them, but during a snowstorm there is not much to see anyway, apart from white movement and your own poor decisions. Wooden shutters add another layer at night. They close against wind and blowing snow. A blanket or quilt may then be hung inside the window for further insulation, layer upon layer. The family builds a barrier. This habit reflects a broader historical truth. Before modern insulation and central heating, households across cold climates relied on small rooms, heavy curtains, wall hangings, enclosed beds, and shared living spaces. Heat was not evenly distributed. You did not warm the entire building. You warmed the place where people gathered. The family therefore pulls inward. Cooking, sewing, eating, repairing tools, and telling stories all happen near the stove or hearth. Rooms farther away remain cold enough for frost to form on the walls. A basin of water may freeze overnight. Clothing left near an exterior wall stiffens by morning. No one wanders casually from room to room in a thin nightshirt, unless that person wishes to learn something memorable about regret. Historians continue to debate whether settlers consistently understood the insulating value of sod before building, or whether many discovered its advantages mainly through necessity and experience. Advice manuals sometimes recommended particular designs, yet actual homes varied according to local materials, available labour, cultural traditions, and simple desperation. Roof construction matters just as much as the walls. A roof must carry snow without collapsing. It must resist wind that tries to lift it. It must keep sparks from escaping too easily, while also allowing smoke to leave through the chimney. Poles or rafters form the frame. Over them may lie boards, shingles, thatch, bark, or sod. Heavy snow is not always removed immediately. A layer of snow can provide extra insulation, trapping air and reducing heat loss. but too much weight becomes dangerous. The family listens for cracking wood, sagging beams, or unusual sounds above the ceiling. You remember the earlier groan in the storm and now hear it differently. Perhaps it was only wind. Perhaps a rafter shifted. The uncertainty keeps everyone attentive. A support pole may be placed beneath a weak beam. Snow might be cleared from the roof when conditions allow. This is not pleasant work. You climb into bitter air, shovel while wind pushes at your back, and try not to slide from a roof into a drift deep enough to swallow you politely. The chimney creates another vulnerable place. If it is built from stone or brick, it may be relatively stable in poorer or temporary homes. A chimney may be made from sticks coated with clay. Such structures are sometimes called mud and stick chimneys. They're cheap, practical, and alarmingly enthusiastic about catching fire. Families inspect cracks in the clay and repair them quickly. Sparks landing on a wooden or thatched roof can become disastrous. Snow lowers the risk outside, but inside, dry wood, bedding, clothing, and stored food sit close together. A curious detail from frontier housekeeping is that some families pasted newspapers across interior walls. The paper covered cracks, reduced drafts slightly, and added decoration. Old advertisements, political speeches, and shipping notices became wallpaper. You might fall asleep beside a column announcing farm equipment prices from 3 years earlier, which is probably still more restful than modern news. As the wind continues to press against the house, the family keeps checking every surface. Hands move along seams. Cloth is tucked beneath the door. A loose shutter is secured. More mud is pressed into a widening crack near the floor. The shelter survives not because it is perfect, but because people continually maintain it. That is the quiet truth of frontier building. A house is never fully finished. Frost loosens material. Rain washes it away. Wood shrinks. Sod settles. Animals burrow. Smoke stains the ceiling. Every season reveals another repair. Yet tonight, the low roof holds. The shutters remain closed. The walls keep most of the wind beyond them. Inside, the room glows dimly, warmest at the centre and coldest at the edges. You sit close to the stove, listening to the storm test the cabin from every direction, and beneath that sound, almost too softly to notice, comes another concern. The fire consumes another piece of wood. That single piece of wood settles among the coals with a faint crack, and everyone in the room notices. No one comments on it. Frontier families do not usually pause to deliver speeches about fuel management. They simply watch the fire, judge the colour of the embers, and understand that every log placed inside the stove is one fewer log waiting beside the wall. You move closer to the wood pile and count what remains. Some pieces are thick and slow burning, others are thin enough for kindling. A few feel damp where snow reached them before they were carried indoors. The best wood was cut months ago, split, stacked, and allowed to dry through warm weather. Seasoned wood catches easily and produces more useful heat. Freshly cut wood holds moisture, smokes heavily, and wastes energy boiling away its own water before properly warming the room. This is why winter survival begins long before winter. During spring and summer, trees are felled where timber is available, branches are trimmed, trunks are cut into manageable lengths, then split with an axe or wedge. The work continues through heat, insects, aching shoulders, and the constant temptation to decide that tomorrow would be a much nicer day for chopping. Tomorrow, unfortunately, becomes December with surprising efficiency. A household may need many cords of firewood for a long cold season. A cord is a stacked measure of wood, traditionally 4 feet high, 4 feet wide, and 8 feet long. The exact amount a family burns varies greatly according to climate, house size, stove design, fuel quality, and how much cold everyone is willing to tolerate without complaining. The answer to that final question is usually quite a lot. In forested areas, wood is the obvious fuel on treeless plains. Families face a different problem. Timber may be scarce and reserved for construction, fencing, or repairs. Settlers then burn whatever can provide heat. You may see dried grass twisted into bundles. Corn cobs go into the stove. Sunflower stalks, brush, bark, and scraps of broken furniture become useful. Peat may be cut from wet ground in some regions, dried, and burned slowly. Coal offers stronger heat where it can be purchased or mined. Though transporting it to isolated homes is difficult and expensive, then there is one of the most famous frontier fuels, dried animal dung. Buffalo chips, gathered from the plains, burn surprisingly well once thoroughly dry. Later settlers also use dried cow dung. The smell is not quite as dreadful as you might expect when the fuel is properly dried, though this is perhaps not the most glamorous sentence ever written about domestic comfort. Children are often sent to collect it. They cross fields with sacks or baskets, gathering flat, sun-dried pieces and carrying them home for storage. It is useful work, essential work, and probably not the childhood adventure later generations imagine when discussing frontier freedom. A quirky account from the plains describes families judging the coming weather by how quickly stored buffalo chips absorbed dampness. Whether this was reliable meteorology is doubtful, but when your heating supply begins to feel clammy, you become attentive to every possible warning. Tonight, the fuel must remain dry. Wood is stacked near the stove, but not too near. Sparks can jump. Excessive heat can dry boards and fabric until they ignite with little warning. The family keeps only a small indoor supply and stores the rest in a shed, lean shelter, or covered pile outside. But the snow has already begun to bury that reserve. You remember the path cleared earlier? By morning, it may be gone. Someone will have to dig toward the stack, perhaps using a rope to avoid losing direction. If the drift covers the pile entirely, each armful becomes an excavation. This is why experienced families place fuel close to the house before severe weather arrives. Sometimes logs are stacked along an exterior wall, where they offer a little additional protection from wind. Kindling is prepared in advance. Chips and bark are kept in boxes. Matches are protected from moisture in tins, bottles, or carefully chosen shelves. A fire without a way to relight it is a frightening thing. Before widespread safety matches, people preserve coals overnight beneath ash. A well-banked fire can remain alive until morning, glowing quietly beneath a grey covering. The person who wakes first stirs the ashes, adds dry tinder, and breathes life into the embers. You watch this process in the dim cabin. The stove door opens, a poker moves the coals together, ashes spread over part of the fire to slow its burning. Air vents are adjusted. Too much air makes the fuel blaze quickly. Too little may choke the flame and fill the room with smoke. Stove management is a skill learned through repetition. Cast iron stoves become increasingly common in 19th century homes because they use fuel more efficiently than open fireplaces and allow better control of heat. They also provide a surface for cooking, warming water, drying mittens, and burning the fingers of anyone who forgets that iron remains hot after the flame appears calm. Historians still dispute how rapidly efficient stoves transform daily survival in remote settlements. Since availability differed greatly by region and wealth, some households obtained manufactured stoves early. Others continued relying on fireplaces or rough homemade heating arrangements, long after improved models were advertised in towns. An open hearth consumes fuel rapidly and sends much of its heat up the chimney. It offers light, a place to cook, and a comforting view of the flames. But comfort can be deceptive. The front of your body warms while your back remains cold enough to question the fairness of nature. A stove encloses the fire and radiates heat more evenly, yet it brings risks. A blocked chimney can send smoke into the room. A cracked stovepipe may leak sparks or poisonous gases. Families may not understand carbon monoxide as you do today, but they know that poor ventilation causes headaches, dizziness, and illness, so the cabin can never be sealed completely. A tiny exchange of air is necessary. Even when every draft feels offensive, the family balances two dangers: cold from outside and smoke from within. Survival often means choosing the least unpleasant problem rather than eliminating all problems. The children gather small scraps from the floor. Nothing burnable is wasted. Broken handles, worn wooden bowls, packing crates, and splintered furniture may eventually feed the stove. A chair missing one leg is no longer a chair during an emergency. It is several minutes of heat with sentimental value. The adults ration fuel according to time of day. During cooking, the fire burns hotter. In late evening, it is reduced at night. Blankets and shared body warmth do more of the work. Before dawn, when temperatures are often lowest, someone rises to rebuild the flame. This person leaves the bed reluctantly. Feet touch a freezing floor. Breath becomes visible. Fingers stiffen while opening the stove. The room is silent except for wind and the faint movement of sleeping people. Then tinder catches. A thin flame appears, and the iron begins to tick as it warms. That quiet task may save everyone from hours of dangerous cold. Outside, the storm continues without concern for how many logs remain. Inside, the pile grows smaller in a way that feels almost audible. Each piece is selected carefully. Heavy wood for long heat, thin wood for quick flame. Damp pieces placed nearby to dry before use. Nothing is thrown in carelessly now. You sit beside the stove and feel warmth reach your face, behind you. The room remains cool. Beyond the walls, drifts rise against the windows. The family has shelter, food, and a living flame, but all three depend upon supplies that can disappear. The next log is lifted, weighed in one hand, and set aside. Not yet. The coals can last a little longer. Not yet. The coals can wait, and so can the next log, but hunger is less patient. As the fire settles, attention turns toward the shelves, barrels, sacks, and hidden corners where the household has stored its winter food. Every container holds a calculation. You stand beside a barrel of flour and lift the wooden lid. A pale smell rises, dry and faintly sweet. The amount has already been judged. A scoop removes only what supper requires. Nothing is measured casually now. Across much of the 19th century frontier, families depended heavily on preserved foods because fresh supplies became scarce during winter. Flour, cornmeal, beans, dried peas, salt pork, smoked meat, potatoes, onions, turnips, and dried fruit formed the backbone of many household stores. The mixture changed by region and means, but the principle remained the same. Food prepared in warmer months had to survive until roads reopened and new crops returned. That sounds simple until you remember that food also attracts moisture, mold, insects, mice, and occasionally a child who believes dried apples do not count if eaten in secret. The family begins with grain. Flour is precious because it can become bread, biscuits, dumplings, thickening for stew or porridge. It must stay dry. A damp sack can spoil quickly. Barrels are kept raised from the floor where possible, since cold ground and melting snow create moisture. Lids are checked. Cloth covers are tightened. A scoop is never returned wet. Cornmeal lasts well and can take many forms. You may stir it into mush, bake it into coarse bread, or fry cooled slices in a little fat the next morning. Repetition is unavoidable. so the same ingredients must feel slightly different. Beans and peas offer reliable nourishment. They store well when dry, though they require water and fuel for long cooking. That creates another calculation. A food may be abundant, yet expensive in firewood, so beans may be soaked overnight, reducing cooking time. A heavy pot sits near the stove, slowly softening. Meat is more complicated. Without mechanical refrigeration, families preserve it through salting, smoking, drying, or freezing. Salt draws moisture from meat and slows the growth of many harmful organisms. A barrel of salted pork may stand in a cool corner, each piece packed beneath brine or surrounded by salt. Smoked meat hangs from rafters or rests in a smokehouse. The room carries their traces: salt, smoke, grain dust, onions, and old wood blend into a smell that clings to clothing. It is the scent of endurance. One familiar historical fact is that root cellars helped preserve vegetables by keeping them cool. Dark and relatively stable in temperature, a cellar might lie beneath a house or inside a hillside. Potatoes, carrots, beets, cabbages, and turnips could last for months if stored properly and protected from freezing. You open a trapdoor in the floor and feel colder air rise against your face. A lamp is lowered cautiously. Below, the cellar walls are dark with earth. Baskets sit on shelves. Potatoes rest under straw. Apples, if the family is fortunate, are arranged so that one rotten fruit can be spotted before it spoils the rest. This requires constant inspection. A soft potato is removed. A bruised apple is used quickly. Mold on one item can spread. Nothing is discarded unless it is truly unsafe. Peels may flavour broth. Bones return to the pot. Stale bread becomes thickener. Fat is saved in a crock. Food waste is a luxury the storm does not permit. There is also sauerkraut, pickled vegetables, preserves, and fruit dried in thin slices. Cabbage fermented with salt can remain edible for a long time and provides welcome sharpness beside heavy meals. Crocks are weighted so the vegetables stay beneath the liquid. One odd pantry practice involved sealing preserves with paper dipped in brandy, or covering jars with cloth and wax before reliable modern lids became common. The brandy serves a practical purpose, though the method sounds festive. Containers vary. Stoneware crocks hold liquids well. Wooden barrels store flour, meat, or apples. Tin boxes protect tea, sugar, and spices from dampness. Glass jars become more common as sealing methods improve. Still, preserved food is never completely secure. Cold can freeze potatoes and ruin their texture. Warm spells encourage decay. Mice chew through sacks. Weevils appear in grain. A barrel may leak. Brine may weaken. The household must notice trouble early. Researchers remain divided over how nutritionally adequate the average frontier winter diet truly was, because memoirs often emphasize abundance in good years and hardship in bad ones. Some families entered winter with crowded cellars and full smokehouses. Others survived on monotonous meals that supplied enough calories but too little variety. Crop failure, illness, and weather could transform the same landscape from generous to severe. Tonight, the family does not know how long the storm will last, so the food is counted again. The flour barrel contains perhaps enough for several weeks if portions remain small. Potatoes are plentiful, but some are beginning to wrinkle. The salt pork will last longer if used as flavour rather than as the centre of every meal. Beans are dependable, provided fuel and water remain available. Often the keeper of the pantry carries the figures in memory. Usually this is a woman who knows how quickly the flour falls, how many candles remain, which crock must be used first, and how much sugar can be spared for a sick child. Her knowledge is easy to overlook because it appears domestic rather than dramatic. Yet the survival of the household rests upon it. She does not merely cook, she predicts. She knows that a generous meal tonight may create hunger next week. She knows children need enough food to stay warm. She knows adults doing outdoor work require more. She knows boredom encourages unnecessary eating, so meals must arrive with routine and purpose. The pantry becomes a map of time. The top shelf holds tea, perhaps coffee, sugar, salt, and spices. They matter less for calories than in morale. A warm cup gives shape to the evening. A little molasses changes plain cornmeal. Cinnamon, if available, can make dried apples smell like comfort rather than storage. You hear the scrape of a knife against a board. An onion is divided. Half goes into the pot, half is wrapped for tomorrow. A strip of pork is sliced thinly, then cut smaller still so every bowl receives a taste. Water begins to simmer. Beans soften beside potatoes. A handful of flour thickens the broth. The meal is humble, but steam fills the room, and the scent draws everyone toward the table. Outside, snow continues to bury the path. Inside, each spoonful represents summer labor, autumn planning, careful preservation, and restraint practiced one meal at a time. The shelves look a little emptier after supper. No one says so. The lids are closed, the sacks are tied, the cellar door is lowered into place, the pantry returns to darkness, holding the remaining days in barrels, baskets, and crocks, and beside the stove, an empty water bucket waits to be filled. And beside the stove, an empty water bucket waits to be filled. You look at it with the unease usually reserved for larger dangers. Snow surrounds the cabin in every direction, piled against the walls and sweeping across the roof. Yet the household can still run short of water. That is one of winter's quieter tricks. Snow appears abundant, but it contains far less water than its volume suggests. A large pot packed to the rim may melt into only a shallow pool. Fresh powder is especially deceptive. All softness and air, impressive to look at and disappointing to drink. The family begins with the well. Before the storm deepened, the buckets were filled. Water now stands in covered containers near the stove, close enough to resist freezing but far enough to avoid soot. Ash and curious elbows. The largest vessel is reserved for drinking and cooking. Another holds water for washing. A smaller amount may be set aside for animals or medicine. Every use has a place in the household order. You do not dip dirty hands into the drinking barrel. You do not pour more than you need. You do not throw away warm cooking water when it might clean a spoon, soften dried food, or heat cold fingers through the side of a basin. A common historical practice in isolated homes was to protect wells with wooden covers, small sheds, or layers of straw. The cover reduced drifting snow, kept debris out, and slowed the formation of ice in severe weather. However, even a sheltered well could become difficult to reach. The pump handle might freeze, the rope might stiffen, the bucket could strike a layer of ice below and return with nothing but a hollow knock. When that happens, someone must venture outside. The same rope that leads toward the barn may guide the way to the well. You pull on stiff boots and wrap cloth across your face. The door opens, and cold air rushes into the room with such confidence that everyone immediately regrets allowing it inside. The well is only a short distance away, yet the path requires effort. Snow rises above your knees. Each step sinks, lifts, and sinks again. The wind presses against your back, then turns suddenly and throws loose crystals into your eyes. At the well, you clear the cover with a shovel. Your gloves scrape against frozen wood. The latch resists. Ice gathers around the hinges when the lid finally opens. Darkness waits below. A bucket descends on the rope. You listen for the splash. Sometimes it comes. Sometimes the rope stops too soon because ice has formed across the water's surface. A pole may be used to break through, though this must be done carefully. Damage the bucket or lose the pole, and the well becomes even less cooperative. When water finally rises, it sloshes beneath a skin of forming ice. You carry it back with both hands, protecting the precious contents from the wind. Some spills over the rim and freezes along the side before you reach the door. The family receives the bucket with quiet relief. No cheering, no speech, just the practical satisfaction of one more problem delayed. If the well cannot be used, snow must be melted. Clean snow is gathered from a place away from the chimney. Animal paths, roof edges, and areas where ash has settled. The upper layer may be brushed aside. Snow from beneath is packed into a pot. You might be tempted to fill the pot completely and place it over the fire. That can scorch the bottom before enough water forms. A little liquid is often added first, allowing the snow to collapse gradually. More is pressed in as it melts. The process takes time and fuel. That matters. Every pot of snow water consumes part of the woodpile. Water and warmth compete for the same resource. A family may therefore melt snow while cooking, placing a kettle where it can use spare heat. Efficiency becomes a daily habit rather than an impressive idea. A peculiar tidbit from cold weather households is that snow was sometimes used for quick cleaning when liquid water was scarce. Metal utensils could be rubbed with clean snow, and woolen rugs might be laid face down on fresh powder and beaten gently. The snow collected dust while the cold reduced dampness. It was not a perfect method, but perfection had already been buried somewhere beyond the door. Drinking melted snow brings another issue. It may taste flat. Snow contains little dissolved mineral content, and melted water can seem strangely empty on the tongue. A pinch of salt, a spoonful of broth, or a little tea improves both flavour and morale. Tea becomes especially valuable during storms. It warms the hands, encourages people to drink, and disguises water that has picked up the faint taste of iron, smoke, or storage barrels. Coffee, where available, serves a similar role. Though no one needs excessive alertness while listening to the roof creak at 2 a.m, water is also required for food preparation. Beans need soaking, flour needs mixing, dried fruit needs softening, salt meat may need rinsing. A dish that appears simple may quietly demand several cups of water before it reaches the table. The cook plans accordingly. Potato water is saved for bread or soup. Water used to rinse grain may go to animals. Broth becomes the base of another meal. Even melted ice from a clean container can be returned to the pot. Specialists continue to disagree about how consistently frontier families understood the health risks of contaminated water. People recognized obvious dirt, foul odors, and nearby waste as dangers. Yet the role of invisible organisms was not widely understood in the same way it is today. Some communities boiled water during illness, or when the source seemed questionable. Others trusted clear water simply because it looked pure. Clear water can still carry disease. That danger grows when families and animals live close together. A well placed downhill from a privy, stable, or refuse area may become contaminated. Spring thaw can wash waste into shallow sources. During a storm, however, relocation is impossible. The family must use judgment, habit, and whatever knowledge experience has provided. Boiling offers protection, but once again it requires fuel. You begin to notice how every need connects to another. Water requires heat. Heat requires wood. Wood requires outdoor labor. Outdoor labor requires food. Food requires water. Frontier survival is not a row of separate tasks. It is a circle, and the household keeps it moving one careful turn at a time. Washing becomes limited. Hands and faces receive priority. Clothing may wait. Floors are swept rather than scrubbed. A damp cloth cleans bowls immediately after use so food does not harden. Personal comfort becomes secondary to conservation. Still, Cleanliness is not abandoned completely. Parents wash a child's hands before meals. A sick person receives fresh water first. Cloths used for wounds are boiled when possible. The household may not possess modern medical knowledge, but experience teaches that filth invites trouble. The animals must drink as well. A cow produces less milk when thirsty. Horses weaken, chickens peck at snow, though snow alone may not meet their needs. Water carried to the barn freezes quickly, forming a thin sheet across the bucket. Someone must break it again and again. You carry another pail through the storm, following the rope with one hand. The water pulls heavily against your arm. By the time you reach the barn, your shoulder aches and your eyelashes feel stiff. Inside, the animals breathe warm clouds into the dim air. A horse lowers its head eagerly. The cow drinks with deep, steady pulls. Some water spills onto the floor and turns slick beneath the straw. You return to the cabin with an empty pail. The trip has taken perhaps 20 minutes. It feels much longer. Near the stove, a kettle murmurs. Snow collapses slowly inside it, shrinking into clear water. Steam rises toward the dark ceiling and gathers in droplets along the coldest boards. The family fills cups carefully. Each person receives enough, but not more than enough. Warm liquid touches your lips. Heat moves down your throat and settles in your chest. Outside, the storm offers oceans of snow. Inside, every drop must be earned. Inside, every drop must be earned. So must every pocket of warmth. You set down the cup and become aware of the clothing wrapped around your body. There are layers beneath layers, each one carrying the faint smells of smoke, wool, skin, soap, and damp air. Frontier families do not dress warmly only to go outside. During a severe winter, they remain bundled indoors as well. The cabin may feel comfortable beside the stove, but a few steps away the cold gathers near the floor and walls. The temperature changes from one corner to another. Your face may be warm while your feet remain numb. Turn your back toward the fire, and the front of your body begins to cool almost immediately. This is why clothing becomes part of the household heating system. The first layer against the skin is often linen, cotton, or a softer wool garment if the family can afford it. Shirts, shifts, drawers, and stockings absorb moisture and protect the skin from rougher outer fabrics. Over these come heavier woolen layers. Wool is especially valuable because it traps air between its fibres and retains some insulating ability when damp. Sheep raising becomes important in many frontier communities, and wool can be spun, woven, knitted, patched, and reused repeatedly. A worn adult garment may become clothing for a child. Later, the same cloth may become mitten linings, quilt pieces, cleaning rags, or stuffing. Nothing retires gracefully. Clothing simply accepts smaller responsibilities. A familiar historical fact is that many 19th century households produced or repaired much of their own clothing. Women and girls commonly spun thread, knitted stockings, cut cloth, sewed seams, and mended tiers. Though store-bought fabric and ready-made garments became more available as transportation and markets expanded, you watch hands move in the lamplight. A needle passes through a wool stocking, the heel is worn thin, so a small wooden object called a darning egg is placed inside to hold the fabric in shape. Thread crosses the hole in one direction, then the other, creating a tiny woven patch. The work is slow. A sock may look unimportant beside the roaring storm, yet a hole against the heel creates friction, lets cold reach the skin, and may lead to blisters. Outside, even a small injury makes walking more difficult. Indoors, a bare patch allows precious heat to escape. Mending is survival performed with a needle. You pull on another pair of stockings. 2 thin pairs may trap more warm air than 1 tight pair, provided the boots still fit. Clothing that is too tight restricts circulation and makes hands or feet colder. That lesson is often learned through uncomfortable experience. Trousers or skirts add another layer. Wool petticoats create warmth around the legs. Men may wear wool trousers over long drawers. Children receive whatever combination the family can assemble, which may include garments passed down through several siblings and altered until the original shape is mostly theoretical. Caps remain useful indoors. Warm air escapes from every exposed part of the body, and the head feels the cold quickly. A knitted cap, bonnet, hood, or wrapped scarf keeps ears protected. Sleeping caps are practical rather than merely decorative. You may feel slightly ridiculous wearing one beside the stove, but dignity has never produced measurable heat. Hands are kept busy and covered when possible. Fingerless mitts allow sewing, writing, and food preparation while protecting the palms and wrists. Full mittens are warmer than gloves because the fingers share heat. Leather outer mitts may shield knitted layers from snow and wind. One curious practice involves placing heated stones, baked potatoes, or small bricks inside cloth and carrying them beneath clothing during travel. The warmth lasts only a while, and a poorly wrapped stone can become painfully hot. Still, it offers comfort when stepping into a frozen wagon or crossing an exposed field. A hot potato in a pocket also has the advantage of becoming lunch later. Assuming it has not collected too much lint, outer clothing must resist wind. Wool provides insulation, but strong gusts can push cold air through loosely woven fabric, a tightly woven coat, leather layer, canvas shell, or fur garment blocks more wind. Fur is particularly effective because the hairs trap air. Rabbit, beaver, muskrat, buffalo, deer, and other animals provide material depending on region and trade. Buffalo robes become famous on the plains. A heavy robe can serve as bedding, a carriage cover, a floor covering, or a wrap around several people. It is warm, durable, and not especially light. Carrying one through deep snow reminds you that comfort often has considerable weight. Researchers still dispute how much settlers relied on indigenous clothing knowledge, rather than European traditions when adapting to extreme North American winters. The answer likely varies by place. Moccasins, snowshoes, fur construction, layered garments, and local sewing methods were learned, borrowed, traded, or adapted in many regions. Yet written settler accounts often fail to acknowledge the full extent of this exchange. You notice moccasins drying near the stove. Soft leather footwear can be comfortable and flexible, especially when lined with grass, cloth, or fur. Dry grass placed inside boots or moccasins adds insulation and absorbs moisture. It must be changed regularly. Wet insulation quickly becomes cold insulation. That rule applies to all garments. After returning from the well or barn, snow is brushed away before it melts. Coats are hung where air can circulate. Mittens are opened. Stockings are changed if damp. Boots are placed near the stove, but not so close that leather dries too rapidly, cracks, or scorches. The room becomes crowded with clothing suspended from pegs, chairbacks, rafters, and lines. Steam rises from wet wool. The smell is earthy and strong. It is not unpleasant exactly, though no candlemaker will soon market a fragrance called crowded cabin after barn chores. Laundry presents another difficulty. Washing heavy clothing requires water, soap, heat, and drying space. During a long storm, full washing may be postponed. Small garments are rinsed. Soiled areas are scrubbed. Underclothes receive more attention than outer layers. Homemade soap is often harsh. It may be produced from animal fat and lye made from wood ashes, if the proportions are wrong. The result can irritate skin or damage cloth. Soap making requires experience, and every batch has its own temperament. Clean garments are valuable, but dry garments are essential. A family may keep one set of clothing reserved for severe weather or emergencies. Children are warned not to soak their mittens unnecessarily. Adults protect their best coat because replacing it before spring may be impossible. You feel the weight of the layers as you move. The clothing changes how you walk. Heavy skirts brush the floor, thick trousers resist at the knees, scarves limit the turn of your head, boots clump against the boards, yet each piece creates a small barrier between your skin and the cold. The family gathers close to the stove, but not everyone can occupy the warmest place. Children may sit nearest for a while, then shift aside. Someone sewing needs enough light. The person cooking needs access to the iron surface. Warmth is shared through quiet negotiation. Even indoors, blankets are worn around the shoulders. A quilt may cover two children reading from the same book. An older adult keeps a shawl wrapped tightly around the chest. A baby rests against a parent, benefiting from layers of cloth and living body heat. The fire softens immediately. The room notices. Someone adjusts a scarf. Another pulls feet beneath a skirt. A child moves closer to a sibling. Clothing, blankets, and shared space take over while fuel is saved. You begin to understand that frontier warmth is rarely complete. It exists in patches, a warm cup between your hands, a wool cap around your ears, dry stockings, a coat laid across your knees, the heat of another person beside you. The storm cannot be kept entirely outside, so the family carries shelter on the body, stitched from wool, linen, leather, fur, patience, and thousands of careful repairs. And as night deepens, those same layers follow everyone toward the beds. And as night deepens, those same layers follow everyone toward the beds. Sleeping on the frontier is not simply the quiet ending of the day. During a storm, it becomes another carefully managed task. Beds must preserve warmth, protect the vulnerable, and allow the household to wake quickly if the fire fades. The roof shifts, or an animal cries from the barn. You look around the cabin and realize that privacy has become less important than heat. Several people may sleep in the same room. Children share beds. Infants rest near adults. Older relatives are placed where drafts are weakest. A guest may be offered a place beside the stove, on a bench, or beneath a pile of robes that smells faintly of smoke and horse. No one complains too loudly about crowding. Bodies produce heat, and shared bedding traps it. A bed occupied by 3 children becomes warmer than 3 separate beds. Brothers and sisters who spend daylight arguing over spoons, chores, and whose turn it is to fetch kindling now lie packed together with the solemn cooperation of sardines. The mattress beneath you may be filled with straw, corn husks, feathers, wool, or dried grass. Straw mattresses are common because straw is available after harvest and can be replaced when it becomes flattened, damp, or infested. The covering is usually a sturdy cloth sack called a tick. Fresh straw gives the bed a high rounded shape and produces a crisp rustling sound whenever you move. By midwinter, the mattress sinks in the center. The straw breaks down, dust gathers, stems poke through the cloth at precisely the places where your body would prefer them not to. Each turn produces a soft crackle beneath you, as though the bed is quietly discussing your weight. Featherbeds offer greater comfort where families possess enough feathers to fill them. Goose and duck feathers are collected over time, cleaned, dried, and sewn into ticks. A feather mattress can feel luxuriously soft, but it also requires careful airing. Moisture from breath and bodies gathers during cold nights, and damp bedding soon becomes unpleasant. A widely recognized feature of 19th century domestic life was the use of layered bedding. Sheets, wool blankets, quilts, coverlets, fur robes, and spare clothing might all be piled onto the bed. The exact mixture depended on wealth, region, and available materials. But the goal was universal: trap as much still air as possible around the sleepers. You lift a quilt and feel its surprising weight. The top may be sewn from pieces of worn dresses, shirts, curtains, or fabric left after making new garments. Beneath the patterned surface lies batting made from wool or cotton. Thousands of stitches hold the layers together. Quilts carry history in scraps. A faded square may once have been a wedding dress. A dark strip might come from a father's old coat. A small printed flower may be the final surviving piece of a child's summer garment. The bed is covered not only with insulation, but with the household's material memory. People sometimes imagine every frontier quilt as a coded masterpiece filled with secret messages. Some quilts certainly contain symbolic patterns and personal meaning, but many are simply practical objects made from available cloth. Their beauty grows from necessity, repetition, and the patient eye of the maker. Historical researchers remain divided over how frequently particular quilt patterns carried deliberate political, religious, or directional messages. Family traditions often preserve powerful stories, yet written evidence can be scarce. What remains certain is that quilts required time, skill, and cooperation, and they kept countless sleepers warm before you climb into bed. The family prepares the blankets. They may be draped over chairs near the stove to take away the sharpest chill. A warming pan can also be used. This is a metal container with a long handle, filled with hot coals and moved carefully between the sheets. The word carefully matters. A warming pan left in one place can scorch cloth. A stray ember can burn a hole through bedding or start a fire. The pan must be closed securely, moved continuously, and removed before anyone lies down. Some households use heated bricks or stones instead. These are warmed near the stove, wrapped in thick cloth, and placed at the foot of the bed. A soapstone bed warmer holds heat especially well. Earthenware bottles filled with hot water serve a similar purpose where available. One peculiar winter habit is warming nightclothes around a wrapped brick before putting them on. This provides a few moments of remarkable comfort, followed by the sad realization that fabric cools much faster than hope. You change quickly. The room beyond the blankets is cold enough that every exposed patch of skin protests. Nightshirts remain long. Stockings may stay on. Caps cover heads and ears. Some sleepers keep shawls around their shoulders or place tomorrow's clothes beneath the blankets, so they will be less frozen in the morning. Boots are positioned nearby. During extreme weather, you do not want to search for footwear in darkness. A sudden chimney fire, roof problem, or call from the barn may require immediate action. The lantern is placed where an adult can reach it. Matches are protected in a dry container. The household is not fully shut down. Someone checks the stove before lying down. Thick pieces of wood are arranged to burn slowly. Coals are banked beneath ash. The air vent is reduced, though not closed so tightly that smoke enters the room. Then the family listens. The cabin sounds different from bed. Wind seems louder through the mattress and floor. Snow brushes the shutters with a dry hiss. Rafters give small clicks as wood contracts in the cold. The stovepipe ticks while cooling. A child asks whether the roof will hold. An adult answers calmly, even without complete certainty. The beam has been checked. The snow is not yet too heavy. Everyone is safe for now. For now is often enough. You slide beneath the layers and feel cold cloth against your legs. The blankets seem to contain no warmth at first. Then the heated stone at your feet begins to work. Another person settles beside you. The trapped air slowly warms. Shared beds require etiquette. You keep cold feet to yourself, at least in theory. You do not steal the top blanket. You turn carefully to avoid waking everyone. The person nearest the wall endures more cold, while the person in the middle may become almost comfortable. Infants need special attention. A baby cannot explain that its feet are cold or its face is covered. Parents keep infants close, checking breathing and warmth through the night. Cradles may be moved near the stove. but never so near that sparks, heat, or smoke create danger. Older children learn to sleep lightly enough to hear instructions. They may be asked to add kindling at dawn, or fetch a cloth if melting snow drips from the ceiling. Even rest carries responsibility. The first waking often comes several hours before sunrise. The firekeeper leaves the bed. You hear blankets shift, followed by the soft impact of feet on the floor. A cap is pulled down. A coat is wrapped over nightclothes. In the dark, the stove door opens with a small metallic groan. For a moment, only faint coals remain. The poker stirs them together. Dry shavings are added. Someone bends close and blows carefully. A red point brightens, then another. Flame catches along a curl of bark. The stove begins to warm. That person returns to bed for a little while, bringing cold air beneath the blankets and receiving several sleepy complaints. Yet without that midnight tending, the room might become dangerously cold before morning. Frontier sleep therefore arrives in pieces. You rest, wake, listen, adjust the blankets, check the baby, hear the wind, and drift away again. Deep uninterrupted sleep is a luxury for calmer weather. Still, the bed provides comfort. Beneath the quilt, the storm feels farther away. The rough walls disappear into darkness. The roof remains overhead. The family's breathing settles into a slow rhythm, mixed with the faint crackle of renewed fire. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, warmth gathers quietly beneath the layers of cloth, around shared bodies, and inside the small, secure space of sleep. Inside, warmth gathers quietly beneath layers of cloth, around shared bodies, and inside the small, secure space of sleep. Morning does not arrive with sunlight. The shutters remain closed, the windows remain pale with frost, and the storm continues to turn the world beyond the walls into moving whiteness. Yet the household wakes because children wake, and children are not especially impressed by weather. One begins whispering, another wants water. A smaller child has somehow rotated sideways beneath the blankets and is occupying more room than seems physically reasonable. The adults rise, stir the fire, and begin the difficult work of making another confined day feel ordinary. Routine matters. Breakfast comes at roughly the usual time. Beds are shaken out, clothing is pulled on, faces are wiped with a warm cloth. Chores are assigned. When a family cannot control the storm, it controls the order of the room. Children carry kindling, fold blankets, sweep ash, and help measure grain. An older child may check the water pot or watch a younger sibling. Even a toddler can carry a spoon from one side of the cabin to the other, though there is a fair chance the spoon will disappear beneath a stool for several hours. These tasks do more than save adult labour. They give children a place inside the family effort. In many frontier households, children contributed to work from an early age. They gathered eggs, watched animals, carried water, collected fuel, weeded gardens, peeled vegetables, and cared for younger brothers and sisters. The exact duties changed with age and circumstance, but childhood was closely tied to household survival. During a severe storm, outdoor work becomes dangerous, so much of that energy must be redirected indoors. You watch a girl sort dried beans, removing stones and shriveled pieces. A boy twists scraps of grass into rough fuel bundles. Another child winds yarn into a ball while an adult knits. The smallest sits beside a box of wooden buttons, arranging them into circles, rows, and mysterious kingdoms. Lessons may begin after chores. Formal schooling on the frontier is uneven. Some communities have schoolhouses and regular teachers. Others depend on short terms held between planting and harvest, during winter isolation. Parents or older siblings may continue instruction at home. A Bible, primer, almanac, newspaper, or treasured book becomes a classroom. You sit beside the stove while a child traces letters with one finger. The page is worn soft at the corners. Reading aloud provides education and entertainment at once. A story that would take 10 minutes in a modern room may stretch for an hour as words are sounded out, discussed, repeated, and occasionally blamed on the printer. Writing materials are precious. Paper is saved. Slates can be used again and again. Chalk or slate pencils leave pale marks that vanish with a cloth. A child works through sums, copies words, and practices a careful hand while the wind pushes snow against the shutters. One well-established detail of 19th century education is that many children learned from primers and recitation. Students repeated passages aloud, memorized lessons, and practiced before the household or class. The method could be tedious, but repetition suited a world where books were limited. The Storm offers plenty of repetition. After lessons, the room must somehow contain play. Toys are simple and often handmade. A carved horse, a cloth doll, a ball of yarn, a whistle, a hoop, a set of buttons, or a few smooth stones may support hours of imagination. Children build tiny cabins from sticks beside the stove. They stage journeys across the floorboards. A folded blanket becomes a mountain. A stool becomes a wagon. The space beneath the table becomes a fort until someone needs to eat. A curious amusement in some households involved creating shadow figures against a wall using candlelight. Hands become birds, rabbits, dogs, and creatures that resemble nothing known to nature. The game requires little equipment, though it can provoke intense debate over whether a particular shape is a wolf or merely an unfortunate thumb. String games also travel easily across cultures and generations. Loops of cord form patterns between fingers. Children learn sequences from parents, siblings, neighbours, and indigenous companions. The shapes shift from one design to another, offering quiet concentration without using fuel, food, or much floor space. Still, confinement wears on everyone. Children become restless, voices rise, arguments begin over who moved the doll, who took the warm place, and who's been breathing too loudly. An adult intervenes before irritation spreads through the cabin. Discipline must be balanced carefully. Fear may keep children silent for a moment, but a frightened child sleeps poorly, eats poorly, and creates new worries for adults. So parents tell stories, assign useful work, and explain enough of the danger to encourage obedience without feeding panic. Academics continue to examine how frontier childhood should be understood, since surviving accounts often come from adults remembering youth many years later. Some memories describe freedom, adventure, and close family life. Others describe relentless labour, loneliness, and fear. Both can be true within the same childhood, even within the same winter. You hear a story begin near the stove. It may be a family memory, a folk tale, a Bible story, or an exaggerated account of an animal clever enough to outwit every adult in the territory. The storyteller lowers the voice when the wind rises, then pauses at exactly the right moment. Children lean closer. Stories carry more than entertainment. They teach caution, courage, kinship, faith, and local knowledge. A tale about someone lost in snow becomes a warning to hold the rope. A story about generosity reminds children why food may be shared with neighbours. A comic tale lets everyone laugh at hardship without denying it. Laughter matters. The cabin feels smaller when no one laughs. Music also helps. A fiddle, harmonica, flute, or simple singing voice changes the atmosphere. Not every family owns an instrument, but nearly every household knows songs, hymns, work tunes, lullabies, ballads, and comic verses fill the room. You hear several voices join softly. The song covers the moan of the chimney. Children tap fingers against their knees. Someone misses a note and continues anyway. The purpose is not performance. The purpose is to remind everyone that the storm is not the only sound in the world. Infants require a different rhythm. A baby must be kept warm, fed, changed, and watched closely. Cloth diapers are washed and dried near the stove. Milk may come from the mother, a bottle, or a carefully prepared substitute when necessary, though safe feeding options are limited. If the mother becomes ill or exhausted, the entire household feels the strain. The cradle may be rocked with a foot while hands continue sewing. An older child sings to the baby. A shawl creates a small, warm shelter around parent and infant. No task stands alone. A child carrying wood learns responsibility. A child reading aloud gives others a story. A child watching the baby allows an adult to cook. Even play restores patience that the family will need later. As afternoon darkens, the children help reset the room. Toys return to a box. Books are wrapped in cloth to protect them from dampness. Bean piles are gathered. Yarn is placed away from sparks. Blankets are folded near the sleeping places. The storm has not weakened. Yet the day has moved forward in lessons, chores, quarrels, songs, stories, and small achievements. The children have been kept warm, occupied, and mostly calm, outside. The snow presses higher against the barn door. Inside, one child looks toward the rope hanging beside the entrance and asks whether the animals are warm too. Inside, one child looks toward the rope hanging beside the entrance and asks whether the animals are warm too. The question settles over the room. No one answers immediately because the truth depends on which animal, which corner of the barn, and how much snow has forced its way beneath the door. The family has checked the livestock before, but a storm changes conditions by the hour. A lantern is lit. 2 adults pull on coats that are still slightly damp from the last trip. Mittens are tied at the wrists. Scarves cover mouths and noses. One person loops the guide rope around a gloved hand, and the other lifts a bucket of warm water. You step through the doorway with them. The wind is waiting. It catches the door, throws snow across the floor, and tries to turn the simple act of closing the latch into a wrestling match. Once outside, the cabin disappears almost at once behind blowing white. The rope becomes the world. You grip it and move hand over hand. Snow reaches above your knees in places. A drift has formed between the house and barn, filling the familiar path until each step feels like climbing through loose grain. The water bucket pulls heavily at your arm. A thin skin of ice begins forming along the rim even before you reach the barn. Livestock are central to survival in many frontier households. Cattle provide milk, meat, hides, and sometimes draft power. Horses move people, wagons, and equipment. Oxen pull heavy loads. Chickens supply eggs and can survive on relatively small amounts of feed. Sheep provide wool and meat. During a prolonged storm, however, every animal becomes another mouth, another body requiring shelter, and another reason to venture outside. The barn door has nearly vanished beneath a drift. You set down the bucket and begin shoveling. Snow blows back into the space almost as quickly as it is removed. The work is slow, but the door must open far enough for a person to enter. At last, it shifts inward. Warm animal breath rolls toward you, carrying the dense smells of hay, manure, leather, damp hair, and old wood. Compared with the air outside, the barn feels almost gentle. The animals turn their heads. A horse stamps against the floor. The cow gives a low call. Chickens murmur from a sheltered corner, feathers puffed around their bodies. The first task is to inspect them. You run a hand along the horse's legs, checking for swelling, cuts, or packed ice around the hooves. Snow can freeze into hard balls beneath a hoof, making standing painful and walking dangerous. A hoof pick or blunt tool removes the build-up. The cow is checked next. Her ears feel cold, but not dangerously so. Her breathing is steady. She shifts her weight as you approach the water. Animals generate heat, especially when sheltered together. A small barn containing several large animals may remain noticeably warmer than the outdoors. Their breath, bodies, and bedding create a pocket of warmth. Yet the building cannot be sealed completely. Moisture gathers from breath, manure, and spilled water without ventilation. Damp air condenses against the roof and walls. Frost forms above, then melts when the temperature rises. Poor air can irritate lungs and encourage illness. Agricultural manuals of the 19th century increasingly advised farmers to provide shelter, dry bedding, and ventilation during cold weather. Actual practice varied widely, especially in isolated settlements where barns were rough, labour was scarce, and timber was limited. Some animals remained outdoors behind windbreaks or in natural hollows. Others crowded into lean shelters, sheds, or parts of the family dwelling itself. Yes, sometimes animals came indoors. A weak lamb might be wrapped and placed near the stove. Chicks could be kept in boxes. A calf might spend a night in an entry space or corner of the cabin when temperatures became severe. One peculiar frontier complaint describes a family waking to discover that a rescued piglet had escaped its basket and climbed beneath the bedding. The piglet was warm. The human occupants were less enthusiastic about the arrangement. Inside the barn, feed is the next concern. Hay lies in a loft or stack, but the supply must last until grazing returns. Animals burn more energy in cold weather, especially when exposed to wind. They may need additional feed to maintain body heat. Yet storms also prevent families from gathering more. The ration is measured. A horse receives hay and perhaps oats if any remain. The cow gets hay, chopped stalks, or other stored fodder. Sheep may eat hay, straw, roots, or grain depending on what the family has saved. Nothing is wasted. Stalks from crops, husks, turnip tops, and coarse grass all become valuable. Even bedding may be chosen carefully so edible material is not trampled unnecessarily. You pull hay from the stack, it scratches your wrists and fills the air with dust. The animals move closer, impatient but familiar with the routine. Their chewing soon creates a steady, soft sound. Water is harder. The bucket you carried has already cooled. The horse drinks deeply. The cow follows. Some spills onto the floor and freezes along the edge of the stall. Large animals need substantial amounts of water. Snow may supplement their intake, but eating snow forces the body to spend energy warming it. It may also fail to provide enough liquid, especially for a milk-producing cow. So water must be carried again and again. Experts remain divided about how often frontier families sacrifice livestock to preserve human food and fuel during unusually long winters. Some accounts describe animals slaughtered before they weakened, allowing meat to be frozen and consumed. Others show families sharing scarce grain with valuable breeding stock in the hope of saving future livelihoods. The decision is not merely practical. A cow may represent milk for children, butter for trade, and the promise of another calf. A horse may be the only transportation. A flock may contain years of careful breeding. To lose an animal is to lose part of the future. Still, sentiment cannot create hay. Families count feed just as carefully as flour. They estimate how many animals can survive on what remains, if the answer is uncertain. The best stock receive priority. Older, injured, or less productive animals may be culled. No one enjoys this arithmetic. For now, the barn remains stable. You add fresh bedding beneath the cow. Straw insulates animals from the frozen ground and absorbs moisture. Dirty bedding is moved aside when possible, though removing manure during a storm is difficult. The goal is to keep resting areas dry. The horse receives a rough brushing. This removes frozen sweat, improves circulation, and reveals injuries hidden beneath winter hair. Thick coats provide natural insulation, but wet hair loses much of its protective value. Chickens present a different challenge. Their combs and feet can suffer in severe cold. Roosts are placed above the floor, away from drafts. Birds huddle together at night. Feed is scattered where it remains dry, and water must be checked frequently because shallow containers freeze quickly. Egg production often declines in winter as daylight shortens and nutrition changes. Every egg becomes valuable. It may go into bread, be eaten by a child, or be saved for someone ill. You search beneath a hen and find one small egg. Still faintly warm, it is carried carefully back toward the door. Before leaving, you inspect the roof. Snow presses heavily above. A support beam appears sound. Though the wood gives a quiet groan when the wind shifts, the barn door is pulled shut. Snow is packed along the lower edge to block drafts, but not so tightly that the animals lose fresh air. You take the rope again. The return journey feels longer. The wind pushes directly into your face. The empty bucket swings against your leg. Behind you, the animals settle into darkness, chewing hay and breathing warmth into the shelter. When the cabin door finally opens, light spills across the snow. Children crowd close as you enter. The egg is held up like treasure. Coats are brushed. Mittens are placed near the stove. The bucket waits to be filled for another trip. The animals are safe for now. But beyond the cabin walls, the snow continues to fall, and every mouth in the household, human or animal, depends upon stores that grow smaller with each passing day. Every mouth in the household, human or animal, depends upon stores that grow smaller with each passing day. By evening, the cook stands before the pantry again. The shelves have not changed dramatically since morning, yet somehow they look barer. A little flour has vanished. A few potatoes are gone. The strip of salt pork is shorter. The beans in their sack sit lower than before. Hunger notices such things quickly. You watch as supper is planned. Not by choosing what sounds pleasant, but by deciding what can be spared. A frontier cook facing a long storm works with limits that would make a modern recipe book quietly close itself and leave the room. There is no quick visit to a shop. There is no delivery wagon coming through the drifts. There is only what the family stored, what the animals can provide, and what imagination can persuade into becoming a meal. The potatoes come first. They are peeled thinly so that little flesh is lost. Even those peels may be scrubbed and added to a broth, fed to animals, or fried when fat is available. Soft spots are cut away. The firm pieces go into the pot with onions and water. A small amount of pork provides flavour. It is sliced into narrow pieces and cooked slowly so that the fat melts out. The meat itself may be too salty to eat in large portions, but a little can season an entire pot of beans or potatoes, salted pork, cornmeal, beans, and flour were common staples in many frontier households because they travelled and stored better than fresh foods. Their presence did not guarantee comfort, but they gave cooks a dependable base from which to build meals. The challenge is variety. Breakfast may be porridge, dinner may be soup, supper may be porridge that has spent the afternoon thinking about becoming soup. The cook changes texture, seasoning, and presentation wherever possible. Cornmeal mush is served hot one day, cooled in a pan overnight, sliced and fried the next. Beans become stew, then filling for a pie, then a thick paste spread across bread. Leftovers are not a separate category. They are simply tomorrow's ingredients. You see a bowl of potato water placed aside. It contains starch and warmth, both useful. It can be mixed into bread dough, added to soup, or used to soften dried vegetables. The water from boiled beans may thicken another dish. Bones return to the pot repeatedly. A bone that appears completely finished may still hold flavour in its joints and marrow. It simmers beside onion skins, herb stems, and vegetable scraps. The resulting broth is thin, but warm, and warmth has its own value. A quirky cooking custom in some households involved keeping a perpetual soup pot near the hearth. New scraps were added as others were removed, and the contents changed from day to day. This practice could be practical when the fire remained burning, though the quality of the result depended heavily on cleanliness, temperature, and whether anyone remembered what entered the pot 3 days earlier. You lift the lid. Steam rises with the smell of onion, pork, and smoke. It is not luxurious, but it fills the room and softens the edge of hunger. Bread requires more thought. Flour is one of the most flexible foods in the pantry, but also one of the easiest to use too quickly. A large loaf may disappear in a single meal, especially when children are hungry and adults have been shoveling snow. So the dough may be stretched with cornmeal, mashed potatoes, bran or other grains. Biscuits can be made smaller. Dumplings dropped into soup make a modest amount of flour seem more generous, because they swell and absorb broth. Yeast can be difficult to maintain. Some families keep a sour starter alive, feeding it with flour and water. Others use yeast collected from brewing, saved potato water, or commercial products when available. Quick breads rely on baking soda, sour milk, or chemical leaveners that become more common during the 19th century. A loaf rises near the stove beneath a cloth. The cabin is cool, so the dough moves slowly. The bowl must be placed close enough to warmth without overheating. Too cold, and the yeast becomes sluggish. Too hot, and it dies. Cooking over a stove requires constant attention. Iron surfaces create different heat zones. A pot placed directly above the firebox boils quickly. Another set toward the edge simmers. The cook moves pans rather than turning a neat numbered dial, which would feel like sorcery if the household uses an open hearth. Pots hang from hooks or stand on legs among the coals. Dutch ovens sit beneath and above hot embers. A skilled cook judges heat by colour, distance, sound, and experience. There are no precise temperatures. There is only the knowledge that the bread smells nearly done and the bottom is beginning to complain. Food scholars remain divided over how inventive frontier cooking truly was during periods of severe scarcity. Some surviving recipes suggest remarkable creativity with limited ingredients. Other accounts describe meals so repetitive that people remembered them with lasting resentment. Ingenuity and monotony likely sat at the same table tonight. The family receives potato soup thickened with flour. Each bowl contains a few pieces of pork, though not enough for anyone to feel wealthy. Bread is cut into careful slices. Butter is absent, saved for a later need or already gone. The children eat quickly. An adult reminds them to slow down. A meal swallowed too fast disappears before the body has time to feel satisfied. Conversation stretches the experience. So does hot liquid, which warms the stomach and hands together. A spoon scrapes against the bottom of a bowl. No one asks for more immediately. The cook watches faces, judges hunger, and adds a small ladle to the bowl of the person who worked outside longest. A younger child receives another piece of potato. An older adult is given softer bread. Fairness does not always mean equal portions. It means recognizing who needs what. Dessert is rare, but sweetness may appear in small forms. Dried apples can be stewed with water. Molasses may be drizzled over cornmeal. A spoonful of preserves can brighten plain bread. Sugar is guarded. It sweetens medicine, encourages a sick child to eat, and gives comfort during hard weather. Using too much for pleasure today may create regret later. Milk, if the cow continues producing, becomes extremely valuable. It can be drunk, added to porridge, turned into curds, or skimmed for cream. In severe cold, milk may partially freeze in the pail before reaching the house. Eggs are equally precious. The single egg found in the barn is not fried for one person. It is beaten into batter, stirred into dumplings, or saved for someone weak. One egg can improve a dish for the entire family when divided through skill rather than slices. The cook also watches fuel. Long simmering dishes consume wood. Beans are soaked, pots are covered, several foods cook at once. Bread bakes while water heats and stew bubbles nearby. The stove becomes crowded with purpose. Even its cooling heat is used. A pan of grain may toast after the main cooking ends. Mittens dry at a safe distance. A kettle waits for morning. Nothing warm is wasted. When supper ends, bowls are scraped clean, crumbs are gathered, grease is saved. The remaining soup is covered and placed in the coolest corner, where it will become tomorrow's first meal. The family is not starving, not yet, but the menu has narrowed. Portions have become more exact. The pantry is no longer a collection of foods, it is a calendar. And each meal removes another day. You help close the flour barrel. The lid settles into place with a soft wooden sound. Beside it, the sack of beans waits in the dimness. The potatoes rest beneath straw. The final onions hang from a string, their dry skins rustling whenever the cabin shakes. Outside, the storm continues to erase the road. Inside, the cook turns scraps, patience, and careful judgment into another warm night. Inside, the cook turns scraps, patience, and careful judgment into another warm night. But warmth and food cannot prevent every illness. The first sign may be small. A child coughs beneath the blankets. An older adult rubs aching hands. Someone returning from the barn removes a mitten and finds the fingertips pale, stiff, and strangely numb. The entire household becomes watchful. On the frontier, sickness is rarely private. One person's fever changes everyone's chores. One injured hand reduces the amount of wood that can be chopped. A mother confined to bed leaves meals, children, water, and animals to others. A coughing child disturbs the sleep of every person in the room. You move closer to the stove while the numb fingers are examined. The instinct may be to rub them hard or place them close to the fire, but sudden heat can cause further injury. The hand is warmed gradually beneath clothing or in mildly warm water. Sensation returns with sharp pain, which is unpleasant, but more hopeful than continued numbness. Frostbite is a familiar danger in severe winters. Exposed skin can freeze quickly in strong wind, and fingers, toes, ears, cheeks, and noses are especially vulnerable. People may not use modern medical terms, but they recognize warning signs such as whitened skin, loss of feeling, clumsiness, and stiffness. Children are checked carefully after outdoor trips. A child may not admit that boots are wet or toes are numb, especially if admitting it means being kept indoors. Adults remove stockings, inspect skin, and dry the feet before damage deepens. The same attention goes to exhaustion. Someone who has spent hours shoveling snow may return trembling, confused or unusually quiet. Warm drink, dry clothing, blankets, and rest are provided. Severe cold can make judgment unreliable, so the person affected may insist that everything is fine while being very clearly not fine. The cabin itself creates health risks. Smoke leaks from the stove when the chimney draws poorly. Ash hangs in the air. Damp clothing releases moisture. Several people sleep, cook, wash, and breathe in one confined space. A clogged chimney may cause headaches, dizziness, nausea, and weakness. The family might blame stale air or fatigue without understanding the invisible gases involved. Still, experience teaches them to open a door briefly, inspect the stovepipe, and improve the draft when everyone begins feeling ill at once. This is a miserable decision during a blizzard. The door opens, precious warmth rushes out, cold air enters, yet the room clears and breathing becomes easier. Medical knowledge in the 19th century was changing rapidly, but access to trained doctors remained uneven in isolated settlements. A physician might live many miles away. Roads could be impassable even in good weather. During a severe storm, a family often relied on home nursing, remembered remedies, practical experience, and whatever medicines were stored in a chest. You open that chest now. Inside may be bandages, needles, scissors, salves, castor oil, laudanum, camphor, mustard, quinine, herbs, and bottles whose labels have faded. Some remedies are useful, some are unpleasant but harmless, others carry serious risks. Laudanum, a mixture containing opium, was widely sold and used for pain, coughing, sleeplessness, and digestive complaints. It could bring relief, but dosage was uncertain and dependence was poorly understood. Patent medicines often made extravagant promises while keeping their ingredients mysterious. A peculiar household remedy involved placing sliced onions near a sick person in the belief that they absorbed illness from the air. The onions didn't remove infection, though their smell was strong enough to make everyone feel that something medically significant must be happening. Other treatments have more practical value. Warm broth provides fluid and salt. Honey can soothe a cough when available. A clean cloth cools a fevered forehead. Steam may ease congestion. Rest protects a weakened body from further strain. Herbal knowledge varies by family and region. Willow bark may be used for pain. Mint settles the stomach. Chamomile encourages rest. Indigenous healing traditions contribute extensive knowledge of local plants, though settler accounts often borrow remedies without properly recording their origins. Medical historians continue to question how much frontier household treatment depended on inherited European custom, and how much came through exchange with indigenous communities, midwives, immigrant neighbors, and local healers. The surviving record is incomplete because domestic care was rarely documented with the same seriousness as formal medicine. The most experienced caregiver in the cabin is often a woman. She recognizes the difference between a tired child and a dangerously weak one. She knows how to clean a wound, support a fevered person, prepare soft food, and judge when ordinary illness has become something worse. Her tools are simple. Her responsibility is not. A cut from an axe or knife can become infected. Splinters must be removed. Wounds are washed with the cleanest water available, then covered with cloth. Bandages are boiled and reused when supplies are limited. You see a hand wrapped where the skin split during wood chopping. The injury is not dramatic, but swelling has begun. The person can no longer grip an axe properly. This matters immediately. Another adult must handle fuel. Older children take on additional chores. The household shifts around the injury, filling the gap before it widens. Childbirth presents one of the greatest dangers. Babies do not wait for clear roads or convenient weather. A woman may go into labor while the cabin is isolated. A midwife, relative, or experienced neighbor might normally attend. But the storm can make travel impossible. The family prepares warm water, clean cloth, bedding, and light. Children are moved to another corner if space allows. The fire is kept steady. Someone listens for changes in the mother's breathing while trying to appear calm. Most births end safely, but complications can become deadly without skilled help. The household knows this, even if no one says it aloud. Fever brings another quiet fear. Illnesses such as influenza, pneumonia, measles, scarlet fever, and diphtheria could spread through families and communities. Crowded rooms helped infection pass quickly from person to person. Isolation inside the cabin is nearly impossible. The sick person may be given a separate bed or corner, but everyone shares air, dishes, blankets, and labor. Caregivers wash hands when they think to do so and keep cups apart where possible. Knowledge of contagion is incomplete, yet observation teaches that some illnesses travel through households with alarming speed. At night, the cough worsens. You hear it from beneath the quilts, dry at first, then deeper. A cup of warm water is prepared. The child sits upright against pillows while an adult rubs the back slowly. No one sleeps fully. The fire is checked more often. The sick child must remain warm, but the air cannot become thick with smoke. Water is heated. Bedding is changed when damp. A basin waits nearby. The storm outside begins to feel distant. Illness pulls everyone's attention inward. The roof may groan and the wind may rise, but the family now listens most closely to breathing. Hours pass. The child finally rests. The cough softens. An adult remains awake beside the bed, sewing perhaps, or simply watching the small movement of the blanket. Fatigue settles heavily across the face, yet the vigil continues. Frontier medicine is often described through strange remedies and crude tools, but most care is quieter than that. It is patience, warmth, clean cloth, measured water, a hand placed on a forehead in darkness, and beyond the frozen walls, the nearest doctor remains somewhere across miles of invisible road, and beyond the frozen walls, the nearest doctor remains somewhere across miles of invisible road, inside the cabin. Night thickens. The lamp burns low, its flame trembling behind cloudy glass. Shadows stretch across the walls and bend around hanging coats, chair backs, and the dark outline of the stove. Every familiar object seems slightly altered after sunset, as though the room has become a quieter version of itself. Light is expensive. Candles require tallow, beeswax, or purchase supplies. Lamp oil must be carried from town and stored carefully. A household caught in a long storm cannot afford to burn bright lamps simply because darkness feels uncomfortable. So the wick is trimmed. The flame shrinks. Everyone moves closer. A basic truth of 19th century frontier life is that many families organised evening work around limited artificial light. Sewing, reading, repairing harness, cleaning tools, and preparing food all became harder after sunset. A single candle might serve an entire table. While the rest of the room disappeared into gloom, you notice how quickly the eyes adjust. At first, the cabin appears nearly black. Then details return: the shine of a spoon, the pale edge of a page, the red line of heat inside the stove, a face leaning over its work. Still. Dim light strains the eyes. Fine sewing becomes difficult. Letters blur. A dropped needle may vanish until morning, where it waits patiently for a bare foot. The lamp also changes the air. Whale oil, lard, kerosene, and other fuels were used in different periods and places. Each produced its own odour and level of smoke. A poorly trimmed wick created soot, blackening chimneys, ceilings, and nostrils with impartial efficiency. Tallow candles had a reputation for smoking, dripping, and smelling strongly, especially when made from lower quality fat. Their wicks needed frequent attention, if neglected. The flame became long and smoky, forming a dark lump at the tip. Someone reaches forward with scissors and clips the wick. The light steadies. That tiny act keeps the room clearer and saves fuel. Frontier life is full of such corrections, each one small enough to be ignored until ignoring it becomes costly. The stove adds its own haze. Even a well-managed chimney may smoke when wind forces air downward. A gust strikes the roof. The flame shivers, and a grey thread escapes into the room. It curls toward the ceiling and spreads along the beams. Eyes begin to sting. A child rubs at them. An adult checks the stovepipe again. The family cannot simply extinguish the fire without it. The cabin cools rapidly, yet too much smoke brings headaches, coughing, and nausea. The door may be opened briefly, or a shutter cracked despite the cold. Fresh air enters like a blade. Everyone pulls blankets tighter. The smoke thins. Then the gap closes once more. Domestic records from cold regions frequently mention soot as an unavoidable part of winter housekeeping. Walls darkened, curtains absorbed odours, cooking vessels accumulated black layers that had to be scraped or scoured. A cabin might smell permanently of wood smoke even during summer. You can feel that smell settling into everything. Hair carries it, bedding carries it, bread cooling near the stove carries it. After several days, nobody inside notices much. A visitor arriving later will notice immediately and politely pretend not to. The limited light and constant smoke create a sense of enclosure. The walls seem nearer than they did in daylight. The storm fills every silence, reminding you that the outside world has been closed. There is no news. No one knows whether the road is open farther east. No one knows if neighbours have enough fuel. No one knows whether the storm covers 10 miles or 100. The absence of information becomes its own burden. Today, you can look at a map, check a forecast, or send a message across a continent in seconds. Here, weather arrives physically. Knowledge travels by horse, wagon, telegraph line, railway, or human voice when those routes fail. Uncertainty settles into the room beside you. One unusual response to winter isolation was keeping a daily weather record in a family Bible, almanac, or notebook. A person might note wind direction, temperature estimates, snowfall, and the number of days since the road disappeared. The record served practical purposes, but it also gave shape to time. You watch someone mark another line on a page. The date is written. A few words follow. Heavy snow, strong wind, no travel. The entry is brief, yet it proves that the day existed and ended. Without routine, days begin to blur. Breakfast follows darkness. Chores follow breakfast. Lamplight returns early. The same people occupy the same room, wearing the same layers, hearing the same wind. Irritation grows quietly. A spoon set down too loudly feels personal. A child humming the same tune becomes unbearable. Someone chews with enthusiasm. Another person breathes through a blocked nose. These are not serious offences, but confinement gives them impressive power. Families develop methods for creating distance where no true distance exists. A curtain may divide a sleeping corner. Someone sits in the loft for a while. A child is sent to sort buttons at the far end of the table. An adult volunteers to check the barn partly from duty, and partly because even a blizzard offers a change of company. Researchers disagree about how severe cabin fever was among isolated frontier households, because its emotional distress was often described through physical complaints, religious language, or silence. Diaries mention restlessness, melancholy, nervousness, sleeplessness, and sudden anger. Modern terms may not fit perfectly, but the strain of confinement is evident. The household tries to protect its mood. Stories continue. Songs return. Small celebrations are invented. A child reads a full page without help. A loaf rises properly. The cow gives a little more milk. The wind drops for 10 minutes. These become events. Humour also survives. Someone remarks that the smoke has preserved the family so thoroughly that future archaeologists will find everyone perfectly seasoned. Another claims the lamp is bright enough to illuminate at least half a button. The jokes are poor. Everyone laughs anyway. Laughter loosens the chest. It breaks the pattern of listening for danger. For a moment. The cabin feels less like a trap and more like a gathering place. Still, darkness affects sleep. People go to bed earlier because work becomes difficult. But they do not always rest. The wind wakes them. The stove requires attention. The sick child coughs. The roof gives a sudden crack. Dreams become vivid. A sleeper may dream of open fields, running water, green leaves, or roads leading toward town. Waking to darkness and snow can feel like returning to a world that has stopped moving. Religious practice offers comfort to many families. Evening prayers establish rhythm and place fear within a larger story. A passage is read aloud. Names of absent relatives are spoken. Neighbours are remembered for others. Comfort comes through practical action. The lantern is filled. The poker is placed beside the stove. The water bucket is checked. The door latch is tested. Order calms the mind because it turns vague fear into specific tasks. You sit near the lamp while the family prepares for another night. The youngest children are already asleep. An older child works slowly through a final line of reading. Someone mends a mitten beneath the weak flame. Another watches the stove without appearing to. The smoke has mostly cleared. The room is quiet. Outside, the storm seems to pause. No one trusts the silence completely, but everyone receives it gratefully. The lamp is lowered once more. Faces fade into shadow. The family gathers within the small island of warmth, holding back darkness with one careful flame, one steady fire, and the reassuring sound of other people breathing nearby. Somewhere beyond the snow, other cabins are doing the same. Somewhere beyond the snow, other cabins are doing the same. The thought changes the room. The family is isolated, but not entirely alone. Beyond the white fields, hidden by drifts and darkness, neighbours are feeding fires, rationing flour, checking children, and listening to roofs groan beneath the weight of winter. On the frontier, distance shapes friendship. A neighbour may live half a mile away or 5 miles away. In calm weather, that distance is manageable. During a storm, it becomes a dangerous country of erased paths, hidden fences, frozen creeks, and wind strong enough to turn a familiar journey into a gamble. Yet communities survive because people do not wait until life becomes easy before helping one another. The first sign of a neighbour may be sound. A faint shout rises beyond the wind. Everyone inside the cabin stops moving. The call comes again, closer now. An adult opens the door while another holds the lantern. Snow swirls into the room. At first, you see nothing. Then a shape appears along the guide rope near the barn. Bent against the storm, it is a man from the next homestead. His coat is crusted with ice. Frost clings to his beard. One mitten is wrapped around the rope, and the other arm carries a sack beneath his coat. He has not come for conversation. His family needs lamp oil. In return, he has brought dried beans. This exchange is small, but it may keep both households functioning. Lamp oil allows safe light during sickness or repair. Beans provide several meals. Neither family possesses enough of everything, so survival depends on combining what each has. Mutual aid was a common feature of rural and frontier communities. Neighbours shared labour during harvests. Barn raisings, births, illness, funerals, fires, and severe weather. Formal institutions might be distant, but practical cooperation existed close to home. You watch the sack opened. The beans are dry and clean. A portion of oil is measured into a bottle. No one debates exact market value. The storm has created its own economy. Trust matters more than arithmetic. The visitor warms beside the stove before returning home. His boots steam. A cup of broth is placed in his hands. He reports that his roof is holding, but one cow has gone lame. Another household farther west may be running short of flour. News travels person to person. There are no reliable updates from town. The telegraph line may be down. The road is blocked. The railway, if one passes nearby, may be buried beneath drifts. So each traveller carries information with supplies. A woman has delivered a baby 2 nights ago. An older man has fever. A barn roof has partly collapsed. Someone has enough hay to share. Someone else has a strong team of horses. If the wind ever eases, The household listens carefully because every detail may become important. A well-known feature of many 19th century settlements was the organised practice of communal labour. Barn raisings and house raisings brought neighbours together to complete tasks too large for one family during winter emergencies. The same habit of collective work could turn towards rescue, food sharing, and repairing damaged buildings. Community is not always sentimental. Neighbours may argue over fences, animals, debts, politics, religion, or whose child broke whose window. Yet when a blizzard traps a family, the argument often waits. Snow has a way of making old grudges look smaller. The visitor finishes the broth and prepares to leave. His return journey is dangerous, so two people accompany him part of the way. A second rope is carried. Lanterns are shielded beneath coats. Each person keeps close enough to touch the next. Outside, the wind has softened slightly, though snow still moves across the ground in pale sheets. The group follows the fence line. Fence posts serve as landmarks, but many are buried. A gloved hand searches beneath the snow for wire or wood. The route bends toward a shallow hollow, then rises toward the neighbouring cabin. You begin to understand why travellers sometimes walk in single file. The first person breaks the trail. The others step into the same deep impressions, saving energy. The journey is slow at one point. The leading figure disappears into a drift up to the waist. The others pull him free. Snow fills his boots. He must stop in the neighbouring house to dry them before attempting the return. A peculiar custom in some communities was to tie bells to travellers or sleigh teams during poor visibility. The sound helped others locate them and warned anyone ahead. A bell could also provide comfort, though listening to it fade into a whiteout was not especially soothing. When the neighbouring cabin finally appears, its window glows amber through the snow. The door opens before anyone knocks. Inside, the room resembles the one you left. Wet coats hang near the stove. Children sit beneath quilts. A pot simmers. The air smells of smoke and boiled grain. The two households could almost be one family separated by weather. The lamp oil is received with relief. News is exchanged again. The lame cow is examined. Her leg may be strained rather than broken. Advice is offered. Bedding is added beneath her. Plans are made to return with help if the storm weakens. Researchers continue to debate how dependable frontier communities truly were during prolonged disasters. Many memoirs celebrate generous neighbours and collective endurance. Other records reveal exclusion, prejudice, rivalry, and unequal access to help. Assistance often depended on kinship, language, religion, race, and reputation. Community could be life-saving. It could also have boundaries. Still, practical necessity often pushed people toward cooperation. A household with flour might lack medicine. A family with strong adults might lack tools. A widow might have food but no one able to clear the roof. A nearby indigenous community might possess essential knowledge of routes, weather, shelter, or winter travel that newcomers desperately needed. Exchange crossed some social barriers, though never all. Back at the first cabin, preparations begin for helping the household said to be short of flour. A sack is measured carefully. Giving too much may endanger one family. Giving too little may be useless. The amount chosen must preserve both. A child watches the flour disappear into cloth. Will we have enough, the child asks. The answer is honest. We should, not certainty, enough hope. The sack will travel when the wind drops, if conditions remain dangerous. A signal may be arranged instead. Smoke in daylight. Lantern flashes at night. A cloth tied to a pole, or repeated gunshots can call attention across distance. Signals vary by region and circumstance. They are never perfect. Wind carries sound away. Snow hides smoke. Darkness swallows small lights. So communities rely on scheduled checks. A neighbour may promise to visit every second day. Families notice when chimney smoke is absent. A path that remains untouched too long becomes worrying. These patterns create an informal network across the snow. No map records it. No official office manages it. It lives in memory. You know which household has a midwife, which farmer owns the strongest horses, which family stores extra grain, which cabin has room for travellers, which child can run quickly with a message, which older settler understands the creek crossings. Knowledge is shared because survival depends on it. The visitors return after midnight. Their coats are stiff with ice, but everyone is safe. The cabin door closes behind them. More snow is brushed from the floor. The fire is stirred. News from the neighbouring household is repeated for those who remained behind. The baby is well. The lame cow may recover. The lamp is burning for the first time in hours. The family relaxes slightly. Outside, cabins remain scattered and invisible, each one surrounded by cold, yet between them run ropes, tracks, promises, borrowed tools, shared food, remembered directions, and the simple decision to check on one another. The storm has erased the road. The community redraws it with footsteps. The community redraws it with footsteps. Soon, you're asked to place your own feet into that uncertain white. The household west of the creek still needs flour. The wind has weakened enough to make travel possible, but not safe. Snow continues to move across the open ground, and the sky remains the same dull colour as the land. There is no clear horizon, only a pale world in which distance becomes difficult to judge. You dress slowly. Dry stockings first, then wool trousers or heavy skirts, a shirt, another wool layer, a coat, scarf, cap, and mittens. Nothing is left loose enough for wind to seize. Cloth covers the lower face, though breath dampens it almost immediately. The flour sack is wrapped inside another cloth to keep snow from reaching it. A rope is tied around the waist. The other end remains with the person beside you. No one travels alone. The route is discussed before the door opens. You will follow the fence line, turn near the cottonwood stump, cross the shallow part of the creek, then climb toward the neighbouring roof. These landmarks sound dependable inside the cabin. Outside, they become suggestions. The door opens. Cold reaches through every layer at once. You step into snow so deep that the first movement nearly pulls off a boot. The surface looks smooth, but beneath it lie hollows, drifts, fence wire, broken branches, and uneven ground. Each step must be tested before weight settles fully. The guide rope runs through your mitten. Behind you, the cabin fades within moments. Its walls are gone. Only a faint dark shape remains where the chimney stands, and then even that disappears behind blowing snow. One established fact of winter travel across northern frontiers is that people use snowshoes to spread body weight over deep snow. Indigenous communities had developed many regional forms long before European settlement, adapting frames and webbing to local snow, forests, and terrain. Newcomers often relied on this knowledge because ordinary boots sank too deeply for efficient travel. You lift a pair now. The frames are light wood, curved upward at the front, with rawhide webbing stretched across the middle. They look simple until you try to walk in them. Your stance must widen. Each foot must lift enough to avoid catching the other frame. Turning too quickly can tangle your legs into a position that is both uncomfortable and undignified. The first few steps are awkward. Then rhythm begins. Lift, slide, set down. The snowshoe floats closer to the surface, and the effort becomes manageable. You still sink, but not to the knee with every stride. The person ahead carries a staff. It tests the snow and helps with balance. In wooded regions, poles also push branches aside. On open prairie, The staff may reveal a hidden ditch before your whole body discovers it. A small sleigh follows behind, tied to a waist harness. It carries the flour, a blanket, a lantern, a shovel, and a little food. Sleds move loads more efficiently over snow than wheels, which become nearly useless once drifts deepen. The runners whisper across the surface. That sound is almost calming. Then the wind rises again. Loose snow sweeps sideways, erasing the track behind you. The person in front becomes a blurred figure only a few steps away. Everyone shortens the distance between bodies. You keep one hand on the rope. The other grips the staff. A curious winter practice among some travellers was to carry a small pouch of charcoal, dry tinder, and birch bark beneath clothing, where body warmth helped keep it usable. A fire kit buried in a frozen pack could become nearly impossible to use. The arrangement was practical, though walking with fragile fire materials tucked beneath your coat required careful movement. You pass the first fence post. Only its top is visible. The next is completely buried. So the leader probes until the wire is found beneath the snow. The group follows its direction. Fence lines are useful, but dangerous. Loose wire can catch a boot. Deep snow may hide broken rails if you follow too closely. You may walk directly into a drift piled against the fence. The route bends toward the creek. In summer, this crossing is shallow. In winter, snow forms a smooth bridge across the channel. It looks solid. Looks are not enough. The leader tests the surface with a staff. Ice may lie beneath, but moving water can weaken it from below. Snow insulates the ice, preventing it from thickening evenly. You wait while the path is checked. The creek gives a faint sound beneath the white, almost like distant whispering. Water still moves under the frozen surface. The group crosses one person at a time. You feel the ice flex slightly. Perhaps it does not move at all. Perhaps your imagination has simply become ambitious. Either way, you continue without stopping. Winter manuals and local experience often advise travellers to avoid sweating during long cold journeys. This seems strange because the body naturally heats during effort. Yet damp clothing cools rapidly when movement slows, so you adjust layers before becoming overheated. The scarf loosens slightly. The coat opens at the neck. Your pace remains steady rather than fast. Cold rewards patience. The slope beyond the creek is harder. Wind has packed the snow into a crust. In some places it supports your weight. In others, it breaks suddenly, dropping one leg deep while the other remains above. The sleigh tips. The flour sack shifts. Everyone stops. The load is righted and retied. No one rushes. Haste leads to torn cloth, lost supplies, or injury. A winter travel researcher may still question how often frontier families used formal safety systems such as guide ropes, marked routes, and scheduled arrival times. Since surviving accounts tend to describe dramatic emergencies more often than ordinary precautions, practice certainly varied. Some households planned carefully, others trusted memory, weather sense, and luck until luck became offended. Today, the group plans. Before leaving, someone noted the expected travel time. If you do not arrive by a certain hour, the neighbouring household will send people toward the creek. The first cabin will also watch for a signal. This simple arrangement reduces uncertainty. It does not reduce the cold. Your eyelashes begin to collect frost. The cloth across your mouth stiffens where breath freezes. Fingers flex inside the mittens to keep circulation moving. Toes press against the inside of boots. You ask yourself whether the roof should be visible by now. The leader pauses. Everyone listens. At first, there is only wind. Then a faint bell sounds ahead, one slow note, then another. The neighbouring family has tied it near the door, giving travellers a sound to follow. The bell seems to come from the left. A moment later, The wind shifts and makes it seem to come from the right. Sound behaves badly in storms. The group moves cautiously toward the strongest direction. A dark patch appears. It might be a haystack. Then another shape rises beside it, more angular, with smoke bending low from a chimney. The cabin. Relief must not become carelessness. The final stretch is often when tired travellers make mistakes. Snow has drifted heavily near the building. A buried wood pile creates uneven ground. The door may be blocked from outside. Someone inside sees you. The door opens. A lantern glows in the grey afternoon. Voices carry through the wind. Hands reach for the sleigh. The flower is lifted first, then the blanket and tools. Everyone enters quickly, pressing the door shut behind them. Warm air touches your face painfully. Snow melts from clothing. Mittens are removed. Fingers are inspected. The receiving family gathers around the sack as though it contains treasure, which, for the moment, it does. Flour dust rises when the outer cloth is opened. The household now has bread for several more days. You're given warm broth. The cup shakes slightly in your hands from cold and exhaustion. No one comments. They have made similar journeys. The return must wait until clothing dries and the wind settles again. Travel is never forced simply because a schedule exists. The weather has the final vote. You sit near the stove, listening to the bell outside. The path between cabins remains hidden. The creek remains beneath snow. The fence line has already disappeared again. Yet you now know that the journey can be made through ropes, snowshoes, measured steps, tested ice, shared signals, and the quiet refusal to let another household face winter alone. Yet you now know that the journey can be made through ropes, snowshoes, measured steps, tested ice, shared signals, and the quiet refusal to let another household face winter alone. Then, sometime before dawn, the sound changes. You notice it first while lying beneath the blankets. The wind no longer strikes the walls with the same steady force. The chimney gives one final groan, then settles. Snow still whispers against the shutters, but the hard pressure has eased. No one celebrates yet. A storm can pause and return. The family waits through another hour, listening for the next gust. The stove is stirred, water is heated, boots are pulled on. When weak daylight begins to show around the shutters, an adult opens the door cautiously. It moves only a few inches. Snow is packed against the outside. A shovel is pushed through the gap, and the clearing begins from within. Small amounts are dragged into the cabin, lifted aside, and pushed back through the opening. The work is awkward. Cold air spills across the floor. Snow melts beneath boots and forms dark, wet patches on the boards. At last, the door opens far enough for one person to squeeze through. You follow. The world has been remade. The fence is almost gone. Only a few posts rise above the drifts. The path to the barn has vanished completely. Snow rests against the cabin walls in smooth white slopes. The roof carries a thick burden, rounded along the edges like a great frozen blanket. The sky is pale and still. After days of roaring wind, silence feels enormous. You hear small sounds that the storm had hidden. A shovel scraping wood, a horse stamping in the barn, snow slipping from a branch, your own breathing inside the scarf. The first task is not admiration, it is inspection. You walk around the cabin, testing the ground carefully. Drifts may hide holes, tools, chopped wood, or parts of the fence. A person can step into a buried ditch and twist an ankle before breakfast. The walls appear intact. One shutter hangs slightly loose. Snow has forced itself beneath the lower edge and frozen there. The chimney remains upright. A dark stain near the stovepipe suggests smoke escaped during the worst gusts, but no serious damage is visible. The roof receives closer attention. Heavy snow can collapse weak roofs, especially when followed by warmer weather or rain. Fresh powder is light, but packed snow grows dense. If melting begins, the weight increases further. A widely accepted historical reality is that major blizzards could damage buildings, kill livestock, block railways, and isolate rural communities for long periods. The danger often continued after the wind stopped, because buried roads, weakened structures, and exhausted people still had to be dealt with. You climb carefully toward the roof with a shovel. The surface is slippery beneath the snow. A rope is tied around the waist, and someone below keeps it secure. Snow is removed in sections so that the roof is not suddenly loaded unevenly. Each shovelful falls with a soft, heavy sound. The work warms your body quickly. Layers are loosened to prevent sweating. The air is cold, but sunlight begins to reflect from the white ground, making the brightness almost painful after days in dim rooms. The barn comes next. Its door is buried again. Though the drift is softer now, several people dig together. The animals inside hear the scraping and respond with movement and low calls. When the door finally opens, warm, damp air rolls outward. The horse is standing. The cow is standing. The chickens are restless but alive. Relief moves through everyone without needing words. Not all news is good. One section of the roof has leaked. Bedding is wet. A feed sack has split where a mouse or rat reached it. Part of the hay near the outer wall is damp and must be separated before mould spreads. The animals are checked carefully. A horse has a small scrape along one leg. The cow has eaten less than expected. One chicken appears weak and remains apart from the others. These are manageable problems. The family knows how fortunate that makes them. Outside, the yard must be rediscovered. Shovels uncover the well first. The wooden cover is intact. Though ice seals the edges, hot water is carried from the cabin and poured carefully around the hinge. The lid opens with a crack. The water below is clear. Next comes the wood pile. Its location is known by memory, but snow has buried every visible sign. A long pole probes the drift until it strikes something solid. Digging begins. After several minutes, the top of a log appears like a dark island. The family uncovers only what is necessary. Removing the entire snow covering may expose the wood to new weather. Some snow can insulate and protect the stack. Enough is cleared to create a narrow access trench. A peculiar detail from some winter accounts is that people marked buried objects with tall poles before storms. A barrel, wood pile, well cover, or gate might disappear entirely beneath snow, but a pole rising above the drift could reveal its position. The practice seems obvious only after you've spent half an hour digging for something 3 feet to the left. Beyond the yard, losses become clearer. A section of fence lies flattened. Snow pressure or wind has pulled posts from frozen ground. One small shed has partly collapsed. The roof rests at an angle, supported by stored tools and a barrel inside. The shed cannot be repaired fully today. It is made safe instead. Loose boards are removed. Tools are recovered. A cloth cover is tied over the opening. Frontier repair often begins with preventing further damage, not restoring perfection. The road remains invisible. Neighbours begin to appear as dark figures across the white distance. Some travel on snowshoes, others come with sleds and shovels. Each carries news. One family lost part of a roof, another has a sick horse, a third cannot reach its well. Someone farther north may have lost cattle where a shelter failed. The community begins assigning work. Strong adults clear paths and roofs. Others carry food, water, or dry bedding. Children gather small pieces of wood exposed by the melting surface. Older people prepare warm meals for returning workers. There is no official meeting. The plan forms through conversation. Questions persist among researchers about whether frontier recovery after storms depended more on individual household skill or on community cooperation. The evidence suggests that both mattered. A prepared family could survive the first crisis, but rebuilding roads, repairing barns, caring for the injured, and replacing lost supplies often required many hands. You join a group heading toward a damaged cabin. The snow is bright enough to make everyone narrow their eyes. Drifts rise like waves between homesteads. Travel is easier than during the whiteout, but still exhausting. At the cabin, part of the roof has sagged inward. No one was injured. Furniture has been moved aside. Blankets are wet. Snow lies across the floor beneath the broken section. The group works carefully. First, the damaged beam is supported, then loose snow is removed. Boards are lifted into place. A temporary covering is stretched across the gap and secured with a rope, poles, and whatever nails can be spared. The repair is rough, but it will hold until better weather arrives, by afternoon. The sun has softened the surface of the snow. Water drips from roof edges. That seems comforting. But rapid melting creates new trouble. Paths become slush. Refreezing at night will turn them into ice. So trenches are cut to guide water away from doors and foundations. The family returns home tired. Boots are wet. Gloves are heavy. Shoulders ache from shoveling. Yet the cabin stands. The fire burns. The well is open. The animals are alive. The pantry still holds food. Supper tastes different that evening. It is nearly the same soup as before, made from familiar potatoes, beans, and a little pork. But now it is eaten beneath a roof that has endured. The shutters are opened for the first time in days. Fading light enters the room. Through the glass, you see the transformed land stretching outward in pale blue shadows. Tracks connect the cabin to the barn, the well, the woodpile, and the neighbours beyond. The storm has ended, its work has not. Tomorrow will bring repairs, burials of lost animals, clearing roads, drying bedding, and counting what remains. But tonight, the family rests with the door unblocked and the sky visible again. But tonight, the family rests with the door unblocked and the sky visible again. Morning brings no return to ordinary life. The storm may be finished, but winter remains, and everyone understands that another wall of cloud could rise before the damaged roof is repaired or the woodpile is rebuilt. Survival now depends on memory. Every weakness revealed by the blizzard must become a lesson before fresh snow covers the evidence. You begin with the cabin. The loose shutter is removed and carried inside. Its hinge has bent under pressure, so the metal is heated, straightened, and fixed back into place. New wooden pegs reinforce the frame. A strip of cloth is added along the inner edge, reducing the draft that slipped through during the worst nights. The crack near the floor is opened, cleaned, and packed again. Clay is mixed with chopped grass and pressed between the logs. Fingers smooth the surface. The repair looks darker than the older chinking round it, but time and smoke will soon blend the colours. Above, the roof receives more than a temporary patch. The weakened beam is inspected from end to end. A fresh support is cut and fitted beneath it. Loose shingles are replaced. Snow guards may be improvised from poles to stop heavy sheets from sliding suddenly toward the doorway. Every alteration carries a memory. Here, the wind entered. There, water dripped. That beam groaned. This corner froze first. The house becomes a record of what almost failed. One enduring feature of frontier settlement was the gradual improvement of homes over several seasons. A family might begin in a dugout, tent, rough cabin, or sod dwelling, then strengthen walls, add rooms, install a better stove, replace a temporary chimney, or build more secure outbuildings as labour and materials allowed. The image of a completed homestead appearing at once belongs mostly to imagination. Real homes grew by patches, a stronger door this year, a lined ceiling the next, a proper root cellar after the harvest, a barn only when enough timber, time, neighbours, and luck finally appeared together. You move toward the woodpile. The storm consumed more fuel than expected, and the remaining stack looks alarmingly small. Fallen branches are gathered from nearby trees. Damaged fencing is sorted, with sound pieces saved for repair and broken scrap set aside for burning. No usable wood is ignored. A sled travels toward a sheltered grove where dead timber can be cut. The route is difficult, but clear weather provides a narrow opportunity. Axes are sharpened, saw teeth are checked, extra mittens and food are packed. This time, the returning load is stacked differently. The lowest logs rest on rails above the ground so they absorb less moisture. The sides are arranged to allow air movement. A simple cover protects the top, while the ends remain open enough for drying. The pile is also placed closer to the door, not so close that sparks threaten the house, and not beneath the roof where falling snow could bury the entrance, but near enough that a person can reach it during a whiteout with a short guide rope. The family remembers digging blindly for fuel. That memory determines the new location more effectively than any instruction book. The well receives its own marker. A tall pole is planted beside the cover, with a strip of dark cloth tied near the top, even after several feet of snow. The marker should remain visible. Another pole marks the woodpile. A third stands beside the path to the barn. One rather practical custom was painting or wrapping the tops of winter marker poles in contrasting colours. Black cloth, red yarn, or dark paint made them easier to see against snow. Such poles were not elegant, but elegance is less important when you're trying to locate a well before your eyelashes freeze. The guide rope is replaced with a stronger one. It is tested from cabin to barn, then from barn to the nearest fence post. Knots are tied at intervals so a gloved hand can measure distance even when visibility disappears. The children practice using it. This may feel unnecessary beneath a clear sky, but practice during calm weather creates habits for dangerous weather. Each child learns to keep one hand on the rope, never release it to chase a dropped object, and turn back immediately if instructed. Survival lessons become family rules. Never leave wet mittens overnight, never take the last dry match outside, never enter the cellar without checking the lamp, never assume the barn is visible simply because it was visible a moment ago. These rules are repeated until they sound almost boring. That is the point. A boring habit is easier to follow in fear than a clever idea remembered too late. The pantry is reviewed next. The storm revealed which foods lasted well and which disappeared quickly. Flour proved useful but vulnerable to overuse. Beans stretched meals but demanded too much cooking time. Potatoes remained dependable, though several froze near the cellar wall, so changes are planned. More root vegetables will be stored next year. Flour will be divided between several containers, reducing the risk of losing everything to dampness or pests. Dried foods will be placed in smaller sealed sacks. Salt and lamp oil will be purchased earlier. Before autumn roads become difficult, the cellar shelves are raised. Straw insulation is added against the coldest wall. A small vent is adjusted to reduce moisture without allowing too much freezing air inside. Agricultural advisors and household manuals often encourage families to keep detailed inventories of food, seed, fuel, and animal feed. Whether every household followed such advice is doubtful, but careful counting could reveal shortages while there was still time to respond. Now a notebook appears at the table. Someone records how much wood the storm consumed, how many days the road remained closed, how much flour was shared, which animal feed ran short first. The figures are imperfect, but they will guide the next autumn's preparations. Specialists remain uncertain about how quickly written advice changed everyday practice in remote communities. Printed manuals circulated widely, yet many settlers trusted neighbours, relatives, indigenous knowledge, and personal experience more than distant experts. Usually, the most effective method came from combining several sources and keeping whatever worked. The barn is improved as well. The damaged section is strengthened with new braces. Cracks are filled without blocking necessary ventilation. Feed is moved away from the damp wall. A raised platform keeps sacks above the floor. More hay will be cut next summer. That promise sounds simple in winter. By harvest season, it will compete with repairing tools, tending crops, preserving food, caring for children, and preparing every other winter supply. Still, the memory of anxious rationing will push everyone to work longer. Repeated storms shape architecture, but they also shape calendars. Spring means repair. Summer means gathering. Autumn means storing. Winter means protecting. Each season leans toward the next. Clothing plans change too. More mittens will be knitted, better boot liners will be made. A larger store of dry grass will be kept for insulation. Worn coats are marked for patching before cold returns. The quilt damaged by roof water is taken apart. Wet filling is dried. Spoiled sections are discarded. New wool is added, the cover is restitched, and a square of fresh cloth marks the repaired area. That patch will remain visible for years. Children may later ask why it is there. Then the story will be told again. The roof bent. The storm lasted. The blankets became wet. The neighbours came. Everyone survived. Family memory becomes another form of preparation. Stories preserve warnings that written lists cannot. A child who hears how an uncle nearly lost the barn rope may grip it more carefully. A young adult who remembers the empty flour barrel may store an extra sack. Yet memory can also polish hardship into adventure. Years later, the storm may sound exciting beside a warm fire. The hunger becomes less sharp. The smoke seems less choking. The fear beneath the roof groan fades. Researchers continue to discuss whether later frontier stories romanticized endurance by hiding exhaustion, domestic labor, and unequal burdens. The heroic version often celebrates the person who crossed the snow, while overlooking the person who rationed food, nursed the sick, dried every mitten, and kept children calm through 6 dark days. Inside this household, those contributions are harder to miss. Everyone remembers who measured the flour, who watched the fever, who woke to feed the stove, who repaired the stockings, who carried water to the cow. Preparation is not one dramatic act before winter, it is months of ordinary work, much of it repetitive and unseen. As evening returns, the repaired shutter closes firmly, the marked poles stand outside, the woodpile sits nearer, the pantry list rests inside the cupboard, the guide rope is tight between the cabin and barn. Nothing can guarantee safety. Another storm may be stronger, illness may arrive, crops may fail, a roof may break despite every brace. But the family is no longer preparing for an imagined danger. It is preparing from experience. The cabin carries the marks of the last storm, and each mark has been turned into knowledge beyond the window. The snow lies quiet under a deepening blue sky. Inside, tools are returned to their places, food is counted once more, and the household settles into a stronger version of the life it had before. Inside, tools are returned to their places, food is counted once more, and the household settles into a stronger version of the life it had before. You sit near the stove and look around the cabin. Nothing here seems grand. The walls are rough, the floor is scarred, smoke has darkened the ceiling, A repaired quilt rests across the bed, its newest patch brighter than the older cloth around it. Mittens hang from pegs. A water bucket stands ready, beyond the door. A rope stretches toward the barn, yet every ordinary object carries the story of survival. The shovel beside the entrance remembers the buried door. The flour barrel remembers careful portions. The stove remembers midnight hands stirring faint coals. The marked pole beside the well remembers a landscape where familiar things vanished beneath snow. Frontier survival is often pictured through a lone figure standing against the wilderness. Perhaps it is a trapper, a farmer, or a traveller leaning into the wind. The image is dramatic, and drama enjoys a solitary hero. Real households are rarely so simple. Survival comes from many hands performing different tasks. Someone cuts fuel, someone preserves food, someone mends clothing, someone checks the roof, someone feeds the animals, someone teaches children, nurses illness, cleans wounds, and keeps track of every candle, onion, and cup of flour. Much of this labour leaves no monument. A repaired stocking is eventually worn through. A loaf is eaten. A bucket of water disappears into soup. A frightened child grows older and remembers only that the cabin felt safe. The history of settlement is therefore also the history of domestic work. Women, children, older relatives, hired labourers, neighbours, and indigenous guides all contributed knowledge and effort that popular stories sometimes placed in the background. A broad historical truth is that frontier communities depended on cooperation as much as individual resilience. Barn raisings, shared harvest labour, borrowed tools, food exchanges, nursing, and emergency shelter helped households endure conditions that no single person could manage alone. Even the strongest adult cannot chop wood, tend a fever, repair a roof, calm a baby, cook supper, and carry water to the barn at the same moment. The family survives by dividing the burden. You remember the neighbour arriving through the storm with beans beneath his coat. He needed lamp oil. Another household needed flour. Someone else had hay. Another person understood the safest creek crossing. Each cabin held only part of what the community required. Together, they created a wider shelter. That cooperation did not erase conflict. Frontier settlements contained rivalries, suspicion, prejudice, and unequal power. Help was not offered fairly to everyone. Some families were excluded because of language, religion, race, poverty, or reputation. The comforting image of universal neighbourliness must therefore be handled gently. Historical interpreters continue to dispute how often frontier cooperation crossed social boundaries during crisis. Some records describe remarkable generosity among strangers. Others show assistance remaining within familiar groups. Both patterns existed, shaped by place, circumstance, and the people involved. Indigenous communities also played a crucial role in teaching newcomers how to move, dress, build, hunt, and survive in cold environments. Snowshoe designs, travel routes, local weather knowledge, plant use, fur preparation, and shelter methods came from generations of experience. Settlers often adopted these practices while later stories presented them as discoveries. The silence around borrowed knowledge can be as revealing as the written record. You look at the snowshoes resting against the wall. Their curved frames seem modest, yet without them. The journey across deep snow might have been impossible. They represent skill carried through culture, observation, and patient teaching. A curious old belief claimed that an especially quiet snowfall foretold deeper cold, while noisy, wind-driven snow promised a change in weather. Such sayings varied from place to place, and they were not dependable forecasts. Still, families repeated them because watching the sky was both practical and comforting when official information could not reach the cabin. A proverb gave uncertainty a shape. Tonight. The snow outside is quiet. The family does not assume that quiet means safety. Experience has removed that luxury. The roof is checked. Fuel is counted. Weather signs are noticed without being trusted completely. Preparedness has become instinct. You begin to see how endless winter storms shaped more than buildings. They shaped personalities, habits, stories, and family expectations. Patience became valuable because many tasks could not be hurried. Frugality became necessary because replacement goods were distant. Attention became protective because small changes mattered. A different note in the wind, a damp smell in the cellar, a cow eating less than usual, a child becoming unusually quiet. Careful people noticed these things, not because they possessed extraordinary senses, but because survival rewarded observation. There was also emotional endurance. You cannot measure it as easily as flour or firewood. It exists in the decision to remain calm when the door will not open. It appears in the song begun while the roof groans. It lives in the story told to children so they will hear a familiar voice instead of the storm. It is found in humour too. Someone jokes about the smoke. Someone complains that the beans are beginning to recognise them. Someone claims that the repaired roof now has more personality than the original. The jokes do not remove hardship. They make space around it. Frontier families carried grief as well as laughter. Not every animal survived. Not every traveller returned. Illness could turn a storm into tragedy. A failed harvest might leave a household weakened before winter even began. The word survival can sound clean when spoken from a distance. Inside the cabin, it was often tired, smoky, hungry, and uncertain. It meant choosing which supplies to use and which to save. It meant waking when the fire faded. It meant giving food to a neighbour while wondering whether your own children would later need it. It meant continuing without knowing the outcome. The deepest legacy may lie in that ordinary continuation after the storm. People did not always speak of courage. They repaired hinges. They dried bedding. They counted potatoes. They buried animals, replaced fences, and prepared for the next winter. Life resumed through chores. That may be why so many acts of endurance disappeared from official accounts. Routine rarely announces itself as history. It simply fills the day until years have passed. But you can pause here and notice it. You can notice the hands pushing cloth beneath the door. You can notice the person rising before dawn to revive the stove. You can notice the child carrying kindling, the neighbour crossing the creek, and the cook turning one egg into food for several people. These small acts held the household together. The cabin is warmer now. The storm has become a memory spoken beside the fire. Children will retell it differently as they grow older. One will remember the buried barn. Another will remember the shadow games. Someone will insist the drifts reached the roof, even if it stopped several feet below it. Memory will soften the cold. It may brighten the lantern and improve the soup. That is one more way families survive difficult winters. They turn fear into a story with an ending. You sit quietly as the final chores are completed. The barn has been checked. The well cover is secure. The shutters are closed. A thick log rests among the coals. The family gathers near the stove, not because danger is immediate, but because closeness has become familiar. Outside, the frontier stretches beneath snow, wide, silent, and touched by moonlight. Inside, the household rests within the shelter it built, repaired, warmed, and shared. The fire lowers gradually, and the room grows softer around its edges. You no longer need to count the logs or listen for strain in the roof. The water bucket is full. The pantry is closed. The animals are breathing quietly in the barn, sheltered beneath their roof and surrounded by clean straw. Beyond the walls, snow lies over the paths you followed. It covers the tracks between neighbours and smooths the marks left by shovels. Fence posts rise gently from the white fields. The tall marker beside the well stands still beneath a calm sky. You settle deeper beneath the quilt. Its weight rests across you without urgency. The cloth carries warmth gathered from the stove, from the people nearby, and from all the patient work that brought the household safely through the storm. The cabin gives a small wooden sigh. Nothing is wrong. The boards are cooling. The coals glow red behind the iron door, fading slowly, steadily, without fear. Somewhere in the darkness, a horse shifts its feet. A child turns beneath the blankets and becomes still again. You breathe in. The air holds traces of smoke, wool, bread, and pine. You breathe out. The storm is finished. The endless white has become quiet now, no longer pressing against the walls, no longer hiding the road. Morning will come gently across the snow, but there is no need to follow it yet. For now, you remain inside this small circle of warmth. You're surrounded by the calm breathing of the family, the soft settling of the house, and the last faint whisper of the fire. Let the frontier drift farther away. Let the roof, the barn, the fields, and the moonlit snow soften into darkness. You are sheltered, you are warm, and all is quiet. Sweet dreams,